Chapter 1035. In the blink of an eye, the front hall became empty. Not a single person remained. Even the dense yuan qi of heaven and earth became extremely thin. So many origin crystals, at least high-grade origin crystals, and there are even top-grade origin crystals. They're mine, they're all mine. Someone lost his composure and cried out. It resounded in the surroundings and entered everyone's eardrums, immediately creating chaos. Get lost, I found them first. The voice was filled with irritation. The aura was chaotic. Sword light flashed, shooting out sword rays. When Chumu's eyes could see clearly, he was instantly stunned. The scene was extremely chaotic. The sword of Gojoseon that had originally fought side by side had now turned into enemies, fighting and attacking each other. Their goal was to snatch even more origin crystals. So many origin crystals. With a glance, Chumu couldn't help but be stunned. This place was even more spacious than the front hall. The yuan qi of heaven and earth in the air seemed to be even purer and denser than the front hall. However, not many people paid attention to this because they were all attracted by the origin crystals. Each of them seemed to have lost their minds. Even the breathing of the 10 or so high-grade sword of Gojoseon became hurried. They were extremely excited and quickly collected the origin crystals. They mainly collected top-grade origin crystals. A top-grade origin crystal was equivalent to 100 high-grade origin crystals. It could even be exchanged for 120 high-grade origin crystals. It was no small matter. With a boom, Chu Mu and Boang exploded at the same time. They turned into two streaks of light and rushed towards the origin crystals. There were so many origin crystals piled up like two mountains in front of them. If they didn't collect some, they would be letting themselves down. Chu Mu's target was naturally the top-grade origin crystals. However, he intentionally avoided the 10 or so high-grade sword of Gojoseon and didn't cause any conflict with them. Although the amount of origin crystals he collected wasn't as much as theirs, Chu Mu was still satisfied. The Overlord, on the other hand, was collecting high-grade crystals. The small mountain of high-grade origin crystals was more than 10 times larger than the small mountain of top-grade origin crystals. By rough estimation, the small mountain of high-grade origin crystals had at least 1 billion origin crystals, while the number of top-grade origin crystals exceeded 100 million. Other than Chu Mu and a dozen advanced sword of Gojoseon, some of the powerful intermediate sword of Gojoseon were also fighting for the ultimate crystals. Scram! An intermediate sword of Gojoseon's eyes turned red as he swung his sword at Chu Mu, intending to send Chu Mu flying so that he could collect the intermediate grade origin crystals. Chu Mu was already prepared. Without any hesitation, he unsheathed his violent thunder sacred sword, which turned into a thunderbolt that pierced through the air. Using the earth-shaking force to its maximum extent, he slashed at the intermediate sword of Gojoseon head-on. An incomparably ear-piercing sound rang out, causing one's scalp to go numb. The terrifying vibrational force impacted the intermediate sword of Gojoseon's sharp sword. The impact spread from his palm to his arm, causing his body to violently tremble. His expression changed drastically as he spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying. The power of this sword was impressive, causing the other intermediate sword of Gojoseon to sober up. They didn't dare to have any ideas about Chu Mu. Not long after, the two mountains of origin crystals were divided up by the sword of Gojoseon. Every sword of Gojoseon had a harvest, more or less. If one were to talk about the ones with the greatest gains, it should be those dozen over high-level sword kings. The top-grade origin crystals that they collected were at least 3 to 4 million each. 3 to 4 million top-grade origin crystals was already several times the wealth of the dozen or so advanced sword of Gojoseon. It made them so happy that they couldn't close their mouths. However, when they looked at the other intermediate sword of Gojoseon, A trace of ruthlessness flashed in their eyes. They seemed to be considering whether they should attack and kill these intermediate, sort of Gojosian, who had snatched the top-grade origin crystals and take their interspatial rings. These intermediate, sort of Gojosian, weren't stupid. They immediately retreated and looked at the dozen or so advanced sort of Gojosian with vigilant eyes. If necessary, they would join forces to fight back. The dozen or so advanced sort of Gojosian also retracted their gazes. Although having more origin crystals was a good thing, they had to attack. Once they attacked, there would be casualties. Their main goal in entering the True Essence Hall wasn't these origin crystals. These origin crystals were just a bonus. At this time, the origin chi of heaven and earth in the middle hall flowed and gathered again. It was almost the same as the scene in the front hall. The invisible hand tore through the void and another spatial door appeared. This time, the sword of Gojosian didn't hesitate at all. They all used their movement techniques and shot towards the spatial door. The True Essence Hall was divided into the front hall, middle hall, and back hall. Now, the sword of Gojosian had entered the back hall. The middle hall was larger than the front hall, and the origin chi of heaven and earth was purer and denser than the front hall. There were also 2 origin crystal mountains. The back hall was larger than the middle hall, and the origin chi of heaven and earth was purer and denser than the middle hall. However, there weren't any origin crystal mountains. However, every sword of Gojosian's eyes widened and their breathing quickened. Even the dozen or so advanced sort of Gojosian were no exception. Their faces were flushed and their bodies were trembling. Their eyes reflected the tall and dense trees. Chu Mu's eyes widened and his throat trembled. His face was filled with shock as he stared in front of him. True essence trees, one true essence tree after another. Tall and dense true essence trees. Taking a closer look, there were a total of 9 true essence trees. One of them was in the middle and was the tallest. It was about 100 meters tall and had no leaves. Instead, it had countless branches. Hanging from each branch was a fruit that emitted an incomparably rich and pure fluctuation. The trunk and branches of the true essence tree in the middle were purple gold in color, as if they were cast from a special metal. They looked extremely sturdy and indestructible. The fruits hanging from each branch were the size of an adult's fist. They were round and smooth, and like the trunk, they were purple gold in color. There were countless complex patterns on their surface, as if they were carefully carved works of art. Extreme, extreme, extreme. One of the advanced sort of Gojosian's eyes bulged and his tongue was tied. He was simply unable to speak a complete sentence. Extreme, extreme grade. Another advanced sort of Gojosian forced himself to calm down. He took a deep breath and was unable to conceal the shock in his voice as he spoke these 2 words. Extreme grade true essence tree, extreme grade true essence fruit. The one in the middle was actually an extreme grade true essence tree. Each of the fist-sized purple gold fruits covered with mysterious patterns was actually an extreme grade true essence fruit. Perilous waves surged in the hearts of every advanced sort of Gojosian. There really are. The advanced sort of Gojosian, who had come with a purpose, all sighed inwardly. For a moment, they were unable to count clearly how many extreme grade true essence fruits there were on the extreme grade true essence tree. However, they were certain that there were at least a few hundred, or perhaps even 1,000. The reason why they were unable to count clearly was because they were stunned and dazzled. The extreme grade true essence tree in the middle was surrounded by 8 other true essence trees, as if they were protecting a king. These 8 true essence trees were about 50 meters tall, and their branches were not as dense as the extreme grade true essence tree in the middle. They were pale gold in color, as if they were cast from gold. They were filled with a luxurious artistic aura. On the branches of each true essence tree hung many fruits. Just like the branches of the tree, the fruits were also pale gold in color. They were about half the size of an adult's fist, and their skin was also covered with patterns. However, they were not as dense and clear as the extreme grade true essence fruit. They emitted a pure and rich yuan qi fluctuation. Although it was not as dense as the extreme grade true essence fruit, it was still very shocking. High grade true essence tree, the extreme grade true essence tree, and the extreme grade true essence fruit were the most eye-catching. After being shocked by the extreme grade true essence tree and the extreme grade true essence fruit, when they saw the extreme grade true essence tree and the extreme grade true essence fruit, they were not completely shocked. However, they were still very excited, and their hearts were trembling. This was because there was not only one extreme grade true essence tree, but 8 of them. Each extreme grade true essence tree had many extreme grade true essence fruits. Each of them was full and heavy, attracting the eyes of the sword of Gojosian, making them unable to move away. Some of the sword of Gojosian who had done some research on the true essence secret realm knew that it was possible to find true essence trees and pick true essence fruits inside the true essence secret realm. In fact, at least 1/3 of the sword of Gojosian who had entered the true essence secret realm had picked true essence fruits. However, those true essence trees and true essence fruits were only of the low grade. The sword of Gojosian was divided into 9 stars, and was further divided into 3 major stages: the low-grade sword of Gojosian, the middle-grade sword of Gojosian, and the high-grade sword of Gojosian. The true essence fruits were also divided into stages. The low-grade true essence fruits corresponded to the low-grade sword of Gojosian. The middle-grade true essence fruits corresponded to the middle-grade sword of Gojosian, and the high-grade true essence fruits corresponded to the high-grade sword of Gojosian. If the true essence trees here were the same as outside, only of the low grade, then the middle grade sword of Gojosian and the high-grade sword of Gojosian wouldn't even look at them, let alone lose their composure. If these true essence trees and true essence fruits were of the middle grade, then the high-grade sword of Gojosian wouldn't even look at them. The problem was that there were no ifs. These true essence trees were truly of the high grade, and one of them was of the highest grade. The true essence fruits on them were also of the highest grade. Every sword of Gojosian was moved. Many sword of Gojosian swallowed their saliva with difficulty, and their throats wriggled. The high-grade true essence fruit was useful for the high-grade sword of Gojosian, and naturally it was also useful for the low-grade and middle-grade sword of Gojosian. If the low-grade sword of Gojosian consumed the high-grade true essence fruit, the effect would naturally be excellent. However, on the other hand, the high-grade true essence fruit contained a vast amount of true essence qi, which was not something that the low-grade sword of Gojosian could bear. Only the middle-grade sword of Gojosian with a tyrannical body could barely bear it and slowly refine and absorb it. But in any case, if they could obtain some high-grade true essence fruits or even top-grade true essence fruits, whether it was for their own use or to exchange for the treasures they needed, it would be an excellent thing. Moved, incomparably moved, the hearts of the 2,000 sword of Gojosian were trembling. High-grade true essence fruit, top-grade true essence fruit. Now, let's talk about how to distribute these top-grade true essence fruits and high-grade true essence fruits. After a long time, a high-grade sword of Gojosian said, "That's right." The other high-grade sword of Gojosian agreed. In fact, in their hearts, they wanted to monopolize all the high-grade and top-grade true essence fruits, but their remaining reason told them that it was impossible. Not to mention that there were other high-grade sword of Gojosian with similar strength to them, just the other middle-grade and low-grade sword of Gojosian alone. Once they joined forces, a high-grade sword of Gojosian, whose cultivation was suppressed, would not be able to contend against them. If they ate the meat, they had to let others drink the soup, so as not to arouse public anger and lead to a big conflict. In the end, not only would they gain nothing, they might even die here. Chapter 1036. In the back hall of the True Essence Palace, an astonishingly dense and pure yuan qi drifted about, making the entire palace look like it was shrouded in clouds. 8 upper-grade true essence fruits surrounded the only peak-grade true essence fruit. The gazes of the sword of Gojoseon moved away from the true essence fruit with great difficulty, landing on the face of the high-grade sword of Gojoseon who had spoken. The dozen or so high-grade sword of Gojoseon had unknowingly moved closer to each other, as if they were about to join forces. I roughly counted. There are a total of 19,000 to 20,000 upper-grade true essence fruits, and more than 3,000 peak-grade true essence fruits. The high-grade sword of Gojoseon glanced at the true essence tree, then retracted his gaze and said slowly, "After the 13 of us discussed, we came to the same decision. The 3,000 peak-grade true essence fruits will be divided among the 13 of us." As soon as he finished speaking, the expressions of the sword of Gojoseon changed drastically. "What?" Another high-grade sword of Gojoseon coldly snorted, like thunder exploding in everyone's ears. His gaze was like cold lightning sweeping across the void. There seemed to be a faint buzzing sound that made one's scalp go numb. A mocking smile appeared on the corner of his mouth as he said, "Could it be that you want a share of the peak-grade true essence fruits? Not to mention the fact that you can't consume the peak-grade true essence fruits. Just the news of you obtaining them is enough to kill you the moment you leave the true essence secret realm." As soon as these words came out, the other sword of Gojoseon seemed to have been splashed with cold water. Their entire bodies trembled, and their expressions changed drastically. Indeed, even if they obtained the peak-grade true essence fruits, they still couldn't consume them. Consuming them would only be courting death. Of course, they could exchange them for other treasures. But the problem was that once they left the true essence secret realm, these high-grade sword of Gojoseon would recover their full strength, and they could kill them in one move. Furthermore, even if they were lucky enough to escape, someone might spread the news, which would be a big problem. However, they were very unwilling to accept this. Now let me finish. Speaking of the distribution of the sword of Gojoseon, a faint smile appeared on his face. "The top-grade true origin fruits will be divided equally between us, and the top-grade true origin fruits will be taken by each of us. The rest will be yours. However, in the world of swordsmen, the strong are respected. I suggest that we divide them according to strength." There were 13 high-ranked sword of Gojoseon, each of them 1,000 superior grade quintessence fruits. That would be 13,000 superior grade quintessence fruits. There were probably more than 6,000 superior grade quintessence fruits left. 6,000 pills might sound like a lot, but if one thought about it carefully, there are more than 2,000 sword of Gojoseon present. If everyone were to distribute the pills, they would only get about 3 pills. However, if they were to be distributed according to strength, those mid-ranked sword of Gojoseon who were stronger could naturally get more, while the weaker sword of Gojoseon might not even get a single quintessence fruit. More than a dozen high-ranked sword of Gojoseon obviously wanted to join forces. They also brought in some mid-ranked sword of Gojoseon and low-ranked sword of Gojoseon. They gathered around them, forming a group of more than 100 people. Think about it carefully. Do you want to fight with us for some quintessence fruits and die under our swords? Or do you want to get the quintessence fruits that belong to you and leave the quintessence secret realm safely? Another high-ranked sword of Gojoseon said, "Perhaps some people were not afraid of death, but they wanted to die with value and meaning. If they died without meaning, they would only be treated as a topic of idle gossip. Therefore, even though many sword of Gojoseon were very unwilling in their hearts, they could only forcibly endure it. There was no other way. It was all because of strength, because they were not strong enough. Even when facing other mid-ranked and high-ranked sword of Gojoseon, whose cultivation was suppressed to the same level as their own, the purity of their sword origin was still too inferior. The difference was at least 10 times, or even 100 times. Coupled with the power of divine sense, the mastery and application of the rules, and so on, the gap in strength was even more obvious. Therefore, once they started fighting, and in the case of more than a dozen high-ranked Sword of Gojosian teaming up with nearly 100 mid-ranked and low-ranked Sword of Gojosian, there was no advantage at all. What's more, who would be willing to die first and let others reap the benefits? If they could not confide in each other, they could not really join forces to fight. If they were not strong enough, they could only swallow their anger. The principle of distribution was thus decided. Although Chu Mu was a 2-star Sword of Gojosian, the strength he had shown was superior to many mid-ranked Sword of Gojosian. Naturally, he would also be given some high-grade vital origin fruits. As for how many, it was not clear at the moment. Chu Mu did not refute, because he knew that with his strength he was not qualified to refute, unless he could fight against those high-ranked Sword of Gojosian. Just as the high-ranked Sword of Gojosian were about to pick the vital origin fruits, a gust of wind blew in from the rear hall. It blew the rich yuan qi of heaven and earth, forming countless cyclones that circled endlessly in the rear hall. The sudden change startled the Sword of Gojosian and made them very vigilant. The rear hall was sealed, so it was impossible for wind to blow in. However, the appearance of wind out of nowhere was abnormal. Whistling sounds could be heard as countless cyclones circled the surroundings, causing the robes of the Sword of Gojosian to sway. Countless milky white cyclones swept towards the vital origin trees. With a whistling sound, they passed by the high-grade vital origin trees and finally gathered at the base of the top-grade vital origin trees. Everyone saw a point that they had overlooked. Under the top-grade vital origin trees, there was a small ball of light. Inside the ball of light, there seemed to be something like a shadow. As large amounts of milky white cyclones poured in, the ball of light continued to grow. Finally, it expanded to a height of about 2 meters. Inside, there was a human figure. The remaining cyclones dissipated and turned back into yuan qi of heaven and earth. The density of the yuan qi of heaven and earth in the rear hall had clearly decreased by a lot. It was only about 1/10 of the previous density, but it was still much denser than the outside world. Chu Mu could still maintain the divine wilderness sword essence at its peak state. Even if it was consumed by using sword techniques, it could still quickly recover. The fact that the density of the yuan qi of heaven and earth in the rear hall had decreased to 1/10 of the previous density had an advantage. That was, the Sword of Gojosian could use sword techniques without worrying that the sword techniques would cause a terrifying yuan qi storm. But now their attention was completely focused on the 2-meter tall ball of light. No, it should be said that they were focused on the human figure inside the ball of light. The black silhouette turned from blurry to clear, and the ball of light seemed to be absorbed by the silhouette inside. As the human figure gradually became clearer, a terrifying energy fluctuation was gradually emitted. It swept out like an invisible storm, sweeping past everyone's bodies, causing their bodies to tremble and their scalps to feel numb. Every Sword of Gojosian had a serious expression. "What is that?" A high-grade Sword of Gojosian whispered. From the human figure that gradually appeared, he felt a huge threat. Finally, the ball of light was completely absorbed, and the human figure inside was also clearly visible. He was the height of a normal human, and his appearance was similar to that of a human. However, his head was bald, and there was not a single strand of hair. His facial features were clear, and he looked very cold, as if he was carved. His eyes were emotionless, and there was only death and indifference. On his body, the energy of the ball of light naturally condensed into a long robe. The color of the long robe looked very complicated, as if it was formed by countless patterns. These patterns intertwined, and there were a total of 4 colors: gold, green, blue, and purple. Each of them emitted a shocking energy fluctuation. It looked like a high and mighty emperor, using his pair of cold eyes to look down on the world. This is the sword chi spirit for colors 4 types of power of law. It is the emperor level sword chi spirit. All the Sword of Gojosian's hearts almost jumped out of their throats. The legendary Emperor rank sword aura spirit had actually appeared in front of them. The true energy secret realm opened once every 100 years, and had already opened dozens of times. This meant that the true energy secret realm had been opened for thousands of years. In these thousands of years, the Emperor-level sword chi spirit had appeared less than 3 times. Every time it appeared, it was accompanied by a storm of blood. In the records, it seemed that every time the Emperor-level sword chi spirit appeared, a large number of Sword of Gojosian would die. The number of Sword of Gojosian that could leave alive was extremely small. If the records were true, it meant that this time they were in danger. Every Sword of Gojosian's face turned ugly, especially the 13 high-tier Sword of Gojosian who came with a purpose. They all looked as if their parents had died. They never expected to meet an Emperor-level sword chi spirit. That was a fierce character that they might not meet even after opening the true energy secret realm more than 10 times. The Emperor-level sword chi spirit's cold eyes swept across everyone. Everyone couldn't help but shiver, as if a cold current had run up their spines. Immediately after, the Emperor-level sword chi spirit reached out its right hand and grabbed at the air. With a whistling sound, the air flowed and gathered, and a chi sword appeared in its hand. The entire chi sword appeared to be intertwined with 4 different colors, as if it had been forged from 4 strange metals countless times. It was a very sharp sword. With the sword in its hand, the Emperor-level sword chi spirit didn't hesitate at all. It appeared in front of the high-grade true energy tree and swung its sword. A rumbling sound rang out like thunder from the 9 heavens. A huge 4-colored Sword of Gojosian tore through the air like a crescent moon and attacked the 2,000 or so Sword of Gojosian. As soon as the sword was swung, it displayed an unstoppable aura, causing the Sword of Gojosian's faces to all change. "Work together, or die for sure!" a high-tier Sword of Gojosian yelled out sternly. He pulled out his sword without hesitation and swung it out using a sword skill. The 2,000 or so Sword of Gojosian all pulled out their swords and used sword skills to fight against the huge sword chi. The Emperor-level sword chi spirit's sword chi attack had reached the Earth rank 4th stage, Earth-breaking sword skill. Among the Sword of Gojosian present, even the high-tier Sword of Gojosian couldn't use an Earth rank 4th stage, Earth-breaking sword skill because it consumed too much energy. With their sword energy, they could only use it once or twice or 3 times. They had to use it at a crucial moment. Even so, the combined sword skill of the 2,000 or so Sword of Gojosian still shattered the terrifying sword chi of the Emperor-level sword chi spirit. Chapter 1037. More than 2,000 Earth rank 2 and rank 3 sword skills collided, causing the Emperor-level sword chi's sword chi to shatter. It transformed into a terrifying energy storm that swept up the heaven and earth yuan chi in the back palace. It rumbled as if it was going to destroy the heavens and earth as it charged towards the Emperor-level sword chi spirit. Logically speaking, with so many sword skills attacking and shattering the opponent's powerful sword chi, it wouldn't consume much energy. On the contrary, because it shattered the opponent's sword chi, the energy from the explosion would be sucked into it, causing unpredictable changes and forming a terrifying energy storm. The high-tier Sword of Gojosian present knew that even if they recovered all of their cultivation, they wouldn't be able to fight against such a powerful storm. Then, could the Emperor-level sword chi's spirit fight against it? Yes, they were very sure of it, even though this thought made them very unhappy. If the Emperor-level sword chi spirit was so easy to kill, the Sword of Gojosian from before wouldn't have died in the Zhan Yuan secret realm, facing the terrifying energy storm that could destroy the heavens and earth. The entire back palace seemed to shake. However, the Emperor-level sword chi's spirit's expression didn't change. Its eyes were still as cold as ever, as if it didn't care about anything. It raised its sword chi and placed it horizontally in front of its body. Its left hand's index finger and middle finger were like a sword as it lightly brushed across the sword. A bright light appeared at the point where the sword chi touched the sword, causing people to be unable to open their eyes. In an instant, a resplendent light burst forth from the chi sword, forming a ring that spread out in all directions. It was like a monstrous wave that swept across the sky. Amidst the rumbling sound, it swept past the terrifying energy storm of the sword technique. Everyone's eyes widened as an incomparably shocking scene appeared. The terrifying energy storm that was like a mountain flood that wanted to destroy a city seemed to have fallen into a swamp, its speed greatly reduced. More than 2,000 Sword of Gojosian were swept by the resplendent light at the same time. Immediately, they felt as if they had fallen into a swamp. The air around them felt sticky, and their every movement was restricted. They had to release even more power, which would undoubtedly increase their consumption. In just an instant, the Emperor-level sword Aura Spirit's sword finger brushed past the Chi sword, and the resplendent light spread out. With the Emperor-level sword Aura Spirit as the center, it spread out in a semicircle, covering the entire back palace. If it was in the air, it would have formed a circle. Looking at it from the outside, it looked like a sphere filled with tiny streams of light. Those streams of light were like strands of drifting sword chi. Within the sphere, the Sword of Gojosian only felt that their bodies were bound. They even felt that their sword intent, rules, sword essence, and other aspects were suppressed. It was as if there was a huge mountain pressing down on them. "What is this?" a Sword of Gojosian asked with difficulty. As for the dozen or so advanced Sword of Gojosian, their expressions were extremely ugly. From their expressions, they seemed to know what this was, but they were too shocked and couldn't react in time. Chu Mu's expression wasn't good either. Among everyone, he was the weakest under the suppression. Chu Mu vaguely had a guess, but he wasn't sure if it was true. Sword. Domain. An advanced Sword of Gojosian opened his mouth, moved his lips, and said these two words with difficulty. With a boom, it was as if a bolt from the blue had struck their heads. Every Sword of Gojosian felt their scalps go numb, and their bodies trembled. Sword Domain. As the Sword of Gojosian of the immemorial world, it was impossible for them not to know what Sword Domain meant. It was something that they couldn't achieve even if they worked hard for their entire lives. Sword Domain. It represented when one's swordsmanship was cultivated to the true pinnacle. When one's understanding of the sword and swordsmanship reached the pinnacle, they would obtain an opportunity to comprehend a mysterious power that formed a unique domain. In the entire immemorial world, although the human race was declining, the number of swordsmen was still immeasurable. There were too many of them. If there weren't hundreds of billions, there were at least tens of billions. Among so many swordsmen, there were very few who had comprehended sword domain. As for how many there were, they didn't know. They could only be sure that comprehending sword domain was too difficult. Most swordsmen wouldn't be able to grasp it even if they practiced hard for their entire lives. Those who grasped sword domain were the strongest among swordsmen. Every swordsman who grasped sword domain was unparalleled in their generation. No one could compare to them, and their names would be passed down through the ages. The most basic sword domain's function was to suppress the power of others to a certain extent. Whether it was the power of heaven and earth, sword intent, sword essence, etc., they would all be suppressed and weakened. In addition, the person who released the sword domain would be strengthened to a certain extent. In this way, the difference between the two sides would widen. The Emperor rank spirit of the sword aura was already stronger than any of the Sword of Gojosian present. Even if the 13 high-tier Sword of Gojosian teamed up, they wouldn't be the spirit of the sword aura's match unless they recovered their cultivation. Now, the Emperor rank spirit of the sword aura released sword domain and enveloped the surroundings. Its own strength was obviously strengthened. On the other hand, the Sword of Gojosian's sword intent, rule of law, and sword essence were all suppressed and weakened to a certain extent. Their strength decreased, and their every move felt sticky, making them more strenuous. The terrifying sword skill energy storm gradually collapsed under the sword domain's power. As the Emperor rank spirit of the sword aura waved its sword a few times, the terrifying sword skill energy storm immediately disintegrated and dissipated into nothingness. This is sword domain. Chu Mu's voice could only be heard by himself. His heart was trembling because of excitement. Sword domain was one of his goals. He had put in a lot of effort for it and had been cultivating and improving. Now his sword skills had reached the pinnacle of the 10th level of the sword technique domain, and his body and spirit had reached the beginning stage of the God realm. As long as he continued to work hard and cultivated his sword skills to the pinnacle of the God realm, he would be able to combine them with the pinnacle of the 10th level of the sword technique domain. He would then be able to comprehend the sword domain and master it. However, for a long time, the sword domain was like a legend. It did exist, but no one had seen it. Chu Mu only knew that he had to cultivate both sword skills to the pinnacle before he was qualified to touch it. However, even if he cultivated both sword skills to the pinnacle, it was still extremely difficult to comprehend the sword domain. Throughout the Archean world, there were countless swordsmen from the human tribe. There were also some outstanding swordsmen who had put in a lot of effort and finally cultivated their sword skills to the pinnacle of the 10th level of the sword technique domain, and their body and spirit to the pinnacle of the God realm. However, they were stuck at the last step and couldn't comprehend the sword intent. Horizontal and vertical were originally two different directions. How could they be merged when they crossed each other? For a long time, Chu Mu had either used the sword technique domain or the sword technique vertical when he fought. He had also tried to use the sword technique domain and the body and spirit of the sword technique domain at the same time. However, he realized that he couldn't do it at all. Just like day and night, they couldn't exist at the same time. They could only alternate. Therefore, Chu Mu had a feeling that even if he cultivated both sword skills to the pinnacle, it would still be very difficult to comprehend the sword domain by combining them. If he could see it with his own eyes, or even feel the real sword domain, it would be different. At least it would leave a mark in his heart. He could slowly comprehend it in the future, and his path would be clearer. Therefore, facing the sword domain of the Emperor-level spirit of the sword Qi, Chu Mu's thoughts were different from the other sword of Gojoseon. He wasn't fearful, nor was he desperate. Instead, he was excited. Of course, if he wanted to comprehend the sword domain in the future, he had to survive. However, from the current situation, it seemed that the only way to survive was to kill the Emperor-level spirit of the sword Qi. We have more than 2,000. If we use all of our strength and don't hold anything back, I don't believe that we can't fight an Emperor-level spirit of the sword Qi. An advanced sword of Gojoseon gritted his teeth and said, "That's right. Don't hold anything back. Kill this Emperor-level spirit of the sword Qi." Another advanced sword of Gojoseon roared, "If we don't live, we will die. The only thing we can do now is fight to the death. Fight to the death." The sword of Gojoseon roared in unison. In the midst of despair, after some encouragement, they had the determination to fight to the death. If they didn't die, they would die. There was no other possibility. With such a mentality, each of the sword of Gojoseon emitted a sharp and determined aura. Fighting to the death, these sword of Gojoseon were able to unleash their strength without fear. The 13 advanced sword of Gojoseon all trembled. They used their secret techniques and exploded with powerful auras. Immediately after, they all took out pills and other things from their interspatial rings and quickly consumed them. Rumbling sounds rang out again. The 13 advanced sword of Gojoseon's bodies emitted waves of sounds. Terrifying auras of different colors spewed out, forming faint flames that burned fiercely. Using a secret technique and consuming pills to increase their strength, the combination of the two caused each advanced sword of Gojoseon's strength to clearly increase by several times. They were even more powerful. In addition, each of the sword of Gojoseon used a secret technique. To the sword of Gojoseon, secret techniques weren't particularly precious. Almost every sword of Gojoseon knew a secret technique. The only difference was the level of the secret technique and the strength of its effects. After using the secret technique, each of the sword of Gojoseon's strength increased. A few of the sword of Gojoseon even took out pills and consumed them. The effects of the pills exploded, causing their strength to increase again. In this way, they made up for the strength that was weakened by the sword domain to a certain extent. The gap between them and the Emperor-level sword chi spirit was further reduced. Even though each of the sword of Gojoseon used a secret technique and even consumed pills to increase their strength, the Emperor-level sword chi spirit's face was still indifferent, as if it didn't feel anything. Perhaps it felt that no matter what these people did, it was just a struggle. With such indifference, the pressure it brought to these people was even more obvious. Chu Mu also used Deshang's burning blood transformation. His body emitted a faint red, flame-like blood mist that swayed and burned, causing his strength to increase by 3 times. Chapter 1038. Boom, boom, boom. Like volcanoes erupting, the 2,000 sword of Gojoseon released a shocking aura. Raising their swords, under the lead of the 13 high-leveled sword kings, they split into 4 directions and unleashed their sword techniques towards the Emperor rank sword aura spirit. The speed of the sword skills were clearly weakened by the sword realm. Their power was also weakened, so they weren't as strong. However, with so many sword skills, they could still threaten the Emperor rank spirit of sword chi. The Emperor rank sword aura spirit had intelligence that was comparable to humans. It knew that once it was hit, the consequences would be dire. Therefore, it quickly waved its sword, exploding with countless sword auras that blasted in all directions. With the amplification of the sword domain, the sword auras were even faster and more powerful. "Get close to it!" roared an advanced sword of Gojoseon. Using sword skills would be weakened too much and would often be broken through. It would be hard to get close to the Emperor rank spirit of sword chi. The only thing they could do now was to get close to it and use sword skills to kill it. Although the Emperor rank spirit of sword chi's sword skills were definitely stronger and more terrifying, they could only hit its body and weaken it by getting close to it. Getting close to it wasn't a blind fight. Instead, it was an organized fight. With the 13 advanced sword of Gojoseon leading the charge, they charged at the Emperor rank spirit of sword chi. In an instant, they attacked with their swords. Every strike was extremely sharp and powerful. The 13 advanced sword of Gojoseon also cooperated with each other to avoid being killed by the Emperor rank spirit of sword chi. In the sword realm, the Emperor rank spirit of sword chi was the ruler. The sword in its hand swung out and drew a circle. The terrifying power instantly blew away the 13 advanced sword of Gojoseon. Behind it, dozens of intermediate sword of Gojoseon exploded and attacked from all directions. The sword in the Emperor rank sword aura spirit's hand trembled and shot out sword shadows that filled the sky. The terrifying and sharp sword light seemed to pierce through the void and shatter the void. It was unstoppable and indestructible, like a meteor shower or a torrential downpour. Chi 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 sounds rang out, accompanied by shrill screams. Many intermediate sword of Gojoseon were pierced through by the sharp sword light and died instantly. The Emperor rank spirit of sword chi quickly moved. In the sword realm, it was as if it had the help of a god. No one could keep up with its speed, let alone surround it. Damn it! In an instant, before the encirclement had any effect, the Emperor rank spirit of sword chi destroyed it. More than 10 intermediate sword of Gojoseon were killed. The sword light danced and blood splattered across the sky. Wherever the Emperor rank spirit of sword chi passed, one sword of Gojoseon after another was killed. The Emperor rank spirit of sword chi, which had intelligence comparable to humans, seemed to understand which sword of Gojoseon were stronger and couldn't be killed in one strike. Therefore, it purposely chose the sword of Gojoseon that couldn't block a single strike of its sword. It was made of yuan qi and sword qi, so it was very sensitive to qi. The 13 advanced sword of Gojoseon were the strongest out of all the sword of Gojoseon. Therefore, the emperor rank spirit of sword qi completely avoided fighting the 13 of them head-on. Instead, it charged into the crowd and killed the other intermediate sword of Gojoseon and lower sword of Gojoseon. Every strike of the emperor rank spirit of sword qi looked very simple and casual. However, the sword of Gojoseon could faintly see that the simplicity wasn't true. It was the result of thousands of refinements, going from simple to complex, and then from complex to simple. It went straight to the essence of the sword technique. It abandoned all decorations, all extravagance, and all falsehood, leaving only the essence of the sword technique. Kill. Every time he attacked, it was to kill his opponent. Terrifying sword techniques, incomparably sharp sword techniques that made people tremble and feel despair. Wherever the emperor rank spirit of sword qi swung its sword, it was invincible. Not a single sword of Gojoseon was its match. They all died one after another. Death made people feel despair. It exploded in despair. Even if I die, I will drag one down with me. A sword of Gojoseon facing the emperor rank spirit of sword qi was in despair. It exploded with unprecedented determination and viciousness. It suddenly compressed its own sword energy, and its body instantly expanded. The moment it was pierced by the spirit of sword qi, it exploded. The surrounding sword of Gojoseon all dodged. The terrifying explosion was suppressed by the sword domain and shrunk to a certain range. It just happened to cover the emperor rank spirit of sword qi. The explosion of an intermediate sword of Gojoseon was undoubtedly very terrifying. Even an advanced sword of Gojoseon would be heavily injured if it didn't die. The shock wave was like a tsunami, but it dissipated under the suppression of the sword domain. The emperor rank spirit of sword qi was revealed. 1/3 of its body had been blown apart, leaving 2/3. If it was a human, it would be close to death. However, the spirit of sword qi wasn't a human. It was an energy life formed by the combination of yuan qi and sword qi. Therefore, it didn't die. The surrounding yuan qi was immediately attracted and gathered. It let out whistling, sounds like a storm. The parts of the emperor rank spirit of sword qi that had been blown apart quickly recovered. Don't let it recover! An advanced sword of Gojoseon roared in shock and anger. It increased its attacks. Countless sword light attacked like locusts. The recovering emperor rank spirit of sword qi swung its sword again and dodged. It shattered a portion of the sword light and dodged a portion of the sword light. In less than 10 breaths of time, its body had completely recovered. It made people feel powerless and despair. A single slash swept through an army. A few more sword of Gojoseon were cut in half and died tragically. The extremely terrifying sword light appeared in front of Chu Mu and slashed towards his neck. The danger of death loomed over him. The shockingly sharp sword light was like the scythe of the grim reaper from hell. It emitted a shocking killing intent, causing goosebumps to appear on Chu Mu's neck. A cold current rushed up from the bottom of his feet. All the hair on his body stood on end, and his scalp was about to explode. That sword was too fast, so fast that even the power of divine sense could not capture it. His mind went blank. He could only follow his instincts and dodge. At the same time, he used his sword to block the emperor rank spirit of sword qi's sure kill attack. A fearsome might was transmitted through the body of the sword. As if struck by lightning, Zhang Xian's body shuddered violently. His bones and muscles felt as if they were about to be torn apart. He was sent flying, and the webbing between his thumb and forefinger had ruptured. He spat out a mouthful of blood and landed heavily 100 meters away. His body felt like it was about to fall apart. He couldn't get up for a moment. Chu Mu's heart was filled with shock. What a terrifying opponent. What a terrifying emperor rank spirit of sword chi. Just one slash was enough to injure him to this extent. Chu Mu tried his best to regulate his breathing so that his body could recover and move as soon as possible. He struggled to stand up. His body swayed and looked like he was about to fall. It could be said that this was the first time he was in such a sorry state since he started cultivating. That slash allowed Chu Mu to clearly feel the terror of this emperor rank spirit of sword chi. Although its cultivation was equivalent to the peak of the third sky of creation realm, the purity of its power was 100 or even 1,000 times better than the sword energy of a third sky of creation realm. It wasn't inferior to the 13 high-rank sword of Gojoseon, whose cultivation had been suppressed. In addition, there was a unique power in that slash. It was equivalent to sword intent. It was completely comparable to a top heaven rank sword intent. Combined with 4 top heaven rank power of laws, its power was a tyrannical earth rank 4th grade earth rank sword skill. Furthermore, with the strengthening of the sword domain, its power had increased by several times. Chu Mu was also suppressed and weakened by the sword domain. Under these circumstances, it was as if he was facing an earth rank 5th grade earth rank sword skill when he wasn't suppressed by the sword domain. Facing such a tyrannical and terrifying power, it was fortunate that he wasn't killed and was only severely injured. Chu Mu knew clearly that if he hadn't used the divine desolate sword art and the large success burning blood transformation, if his body hadn't been tempered by the 9 revolution body refining fruit and become extremely powerful, if he hadn't used the undying sword intent and the power of rules, if he hadn't used the earth-shaking technique, if his sword technique hadn't reached an unfathomable level, and if he hadn't used a defensive technique, he probably would have been killed already. Even though Xiao Chun was not dead yet, the web between his thumb and index finger on his right hand was torn. His bones were aching, and his muscles felt like they were being torn apart. Just moving slightly would cause him to feel a tearing pain. Fortunately, he had refined the wood avatar's origin energy. Waves of tyrannical life force swept through his entire body. His injured parts immediately felt a cooling sensation as they rapidly recovered. Sword domain. If I had grasped sword domain, I wouldn't be in such a sorry state. I might even be able to put up a fight. Chu Mu thought to himself as he controlled his vitality to speed up his body's recovery. Fortunately, he had the wood avatar's origin energy. Otherwise, with such a heavy injury, it would be enough to make him lose his battle strength and become a spectator. He might even die from the shock waves. After several dozen breaths, Chu Mu felt that he had more or less recovered. His right hand grabbed at the air, and the Frenzy Thunder's sacred sword that had fallen to the side flew up. Glancing at it, Chu Mu couldn't help but feel pity. There was a gap on the Frenzy Thunder's sacred sword. It was almost cut in half. This Frenzy Thunder's sacred sword couldn't be used anymore, so he could only put it away. He took out 5 low-rank sacred swords from his interspatial ring and held one in his right hand. His left hand's fingers were like swords as he chanted. The words he spat out caused the air to ripple. After several dozen breaths, his left hand sword fingers pointed at the 4 low-rank sacred swords. In an instant, the 4 low-rank sacred swords trembled and left their scabbards. They turned into 3 different colored sword light: gold, green, purple, and blue. With their fastest speed, they shot towards the Emperor rank sword chi spirit, not far away. The 4 different colored sword light, under the control of Chu Mu's left hand sword fingers, were very agile. They spread out and locked onto the Emperor rank sword chi spirit, attacking from 4 different directions. From the time Chu Mu was sent flying by the sword of Gojoseon to the time he used flying heaven sword controlling technique, less than 60 breaths had passed. However, 60 to 70 sword of Gojoseon had died under the Emperor rank sword chi spirit's chi swords. It was almost 1 death per breath. This was Chu Mu's first time using flying heaven sword controlling technique in a real battle. There were two difficulties in cultivating flying heaven sword controlling technique. The first was deshang, and the second was multitasking. This was because flying heaven sword controlling technique could control multiple swords at the same time. Chu Mu's soul was powerful, so he could multitask before. It wasn't hard for him to control 4 flying swords at the same time. The sword light tore through the air and instantly passed over the sword of Gojoseon. It shot towards the Emperor rank sword Chi spirit and directly hit it. Chapter 1039. Like cutting a cake, the 4 different colored sword light sliced the space around the Emperor rank spirit of sword Chi into 4 pieces. They passed by the Emperor rank spirit of sword Chi's body, causing slivers of Yuan Chi to dissipate. Chu Mu was shocked. The 4 flying swords had indeed struck the Emperor rank spirit of sword Chi, but the effect wasn't as good as he had imagined. The Emperor rank spirit of sword Chi's body was extremely strong. The flying swords that had been infused with a type of rule power weren't enough to heavily injure it. However, this was the first time the Emperor rank spirit of sword Chi had been injured other than when the sword of Gojoseon self-destructed. Its icy cold eyes pierced through the air and landed on Chu Mu's body. Its sharp and cold gaze was like a sword light, causing Chu Mu's body to involuntarily tremble. After killing a low-level sword of Gojoseon with 1 slash, the Emperor rank spirit of sword Chi charged towards Chu Mu like a hot knife through butter. It wanted to kill this human who had survived its attack and dared to attack it. The cold intent locked onto its body, and the threat of death descended upon it once again. "Protect Chu Mu!" A high-level sword of Gojoseon roared. The 13 high-level sword of Gojoseon all charged towards the Emperor rank spirit of sword Chi and slashed out with their strongest slashes. They could tell that Chu Mu's imperial sword technique could cause damage to the Emperor rank spirit of sword Chi. As for why Chu Mu's imperial sword technique could control 4 flying swords at the same time, it wasn't the time to think about it yet. The explosion of the 13 high-level sword of Gojoseon did indeed stop the Emperor rank spirit of sword Chi's advance. The Emperor rank spirit of sword Chi's every slash was extremely powerful, but it couldn't kill any of the high-level sword of Gojoseon with 1 slash. Chu Mu's danger of death was temporarily averted. He once again controlled 4 sword light and linked them together. Like a sword snake, it shot towards the Emperor rank sword aura spirit. The defensive sword technique once again struck the Emperor rank sword aura spirit. This time, the 4 flying swords struck the same spot consecutively, immediately causing even more damage to the Emperor rank sword aura spirit. The amount of Yuan Chi that leaked out increased by several times. All right, continue attacking. The sword of Gojoseon's eyes lit up, as if they had seen a glimmer of hope for victory. The darkness in their hearts dissipated a little, and they became even more spirited. Kill, kill, kill. The group attack was even more powerful. The Emperor rank sword aura spirit immediately suffered many attacks. Many parts of its body emitted Yuan Chi. Although it didn't hurt, it angered the Emperor rank sword aura spirit. For the first time, the Emperor rank sword aura spirit opened its mouth and let out an inhuman roar. Like a devil, it was mournful and powerful. The roar turned into rolling sound waves that carried terrifying power and instantly spread outwards. The visible sound waves carried a faint 4-colored glow. These sound waves actually contained traces of the power of 4 laws, causing the sound waves' power to multiply. The sword of Gojoseon were all hit by the sound waves. Their faces all changed as they were blown back. Their bodies trembled as their blood boiled. Their muscles and bones felt numb, as if they were about to shatter. The demonic sound pierced through their brains, causing them incomparable pain. Blood seeped out of the corners of their eyes, mouths, and ears. It was extremely terrifying. Chu Mu's flying sword light was also on the verge of collapse under the impact of the sound waves. The light on them faded and their power weakened. The Emperor Rank sword aura spirit exploded. Shwa, shwa, shwa. The sword aura in its hand instantly slashed out hundreds of times. The sword aura tore through the sky. The sword aura's speed and power were clearly amplified under the sword domain. The sword aura was even more powerful. With one explosion, hundreds of Sword of Gojosian were struck. They were either sliced in half or split in the middle. Blood splattered everywhere as broken corpses fell. The hellish scene greatly angered the other, Sword of Gojosian. It was too terrifying. It was an undefeatable monster. With just one sword, it killed hundreds of Sword of Gojosian. What could they use to fight back? In an instant, many Sword of Gojosian felt the shadow in their hearts grow. Being shrouded by death, they felt despair again and even lost the will to fight back. They became dead souls under the Emperor Rank sword Aura Spirit sword. The prelude to death was playing. Facing this Emperor Rank Sword of Gojosian, the present Sword of Gojosian were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Even the 13 high stage Sword of Gojosian were injured, spitting out blood with pale faces. No one could fight against it. The Emperor Rank sword Aura Spirit was like an Azura, slaughtering all living things. At this point, thousands of Sword of Gojosian had already died under the Emperor Rank sword of Gojosian's sword aura. The ground was littered with corpses, and fresh blood was like a lake. The thick smell of blood constantly stimulated the Sword of Gojosian's nerves. Some Sword of Gojosian became delirious and muddle-headed. In this hellish, bloody slaughterhouse, the Sword of Gojosian, who were about the same strength as it, couldn't even take a single sword strike before being killed. The bloody scene appeared in front of its eyes as if it was foreshadowing its fate. When a person knew that their death was near, most of them would lose their will to fight and wait for death to descend. Without resistance, the Emperor Rank sword Aura Spirit slaughter was even easier. Batch after batch of Sword of Gojosian died. There were only a few hundred Sword of Gojosian left alive. If this continued, it would be a complete wipeout. Chu Mu didn't lose his will to fight. He was one of the few Sword of Gojosian that didn't lose his will to fight. At this moment, it was also the time to show the strength of a Sword of Gojosian's will. Although he didn't lose his will to fight, he didn't even have the chance to escape from such a powerful and terrifying Emperor Rank sword Aura Spirit's sword realm. One sword, just one sword, and the Emperor Rank sword Aura Spirit would be able to kill him. Looks like I can only use my final trump card. Chu Mu sighed to himself. His final trump card was the 3 Heavenly Desolation sword intents that the 3rd Palace Master of the Heaven Wasteland Earth Palace had given him. The 3 Heavenly Desolation sword intents were extremely precious and wouldn't be used easily. However, in this situation, he had no choice but to use them. Otherwise, if he was killed, the 3 Heavenly Desolation sword intents would lose their support and dissipate. However, Chu Mu also knew that even though his cultivation had reached the 2nd sky of creation realm, his divine thought power had greatly increased, and his control over the Heavenly Desolation sword intents was much better than before. He was still clearly suppressed in the sword realm of the sword Aura Spirit. The Emperor Rank sword Aura Spirit was extremely fast, and with the amplification of the sword realm, it was extremely difficult to hit it. Once he couldn't hit it, the Emperor Rank sword Aura Spirit would definitely defend with all its might. It would be impossible to hit it after that. As his thoughts raced, Chu Mu had an idea. This would require him to take the risk. If he didn't grasp it well, he would become a ghost under the Emperor Rank sword Aura Spirit sword. On the contrary, if he grasped the right timing, there was at least a 70% chance of killing the Emperor Rank sword Aura Spirit. Success or failure would depend on this one move. Taking a deep breath, Chu Mu's eyes shone with an extremely sharp light and were filled with determination. He had no other choice but to be killed or to kill his opponent. At this moment, the 13 high-rank Sword of Gojosian were sent flying. They spat out mouthfuls of blood again and looked dispirited. They were all heavily injured and found it difficult to even get up. As for the other sword of Gojoseon, none of them could withstand a single strike from the sword or a spirit and died one after another. Concentrating his thoughts, he communicated with the saint-rank heavenly desolation sword intent in his mental world. Putting away the 4 flying swords, Chu-Mu charged towards the emperor-rank sword Aura Spirit. The other sword of Gojoseon were afraid that they wouldn't be able to dodge in time, but Chu-Mu charged towards it instead. This scene shocked many people. No matter who it was, the emperor-rank sword Aura Spirit wouldn't show mercy. It raised its sword and slashed towards Chu-Mu, who was already close to it. In an instant, Chu-Mu used the Heavenly Desolation sword intent and placed it in front of him. The moment the Heavenly Desolation sword intent appeared, the sword of Gojoseon present felt a terrifying aura enveloping them. It was as if they could feel the passage of time and endless vicissitudes of life filling their bodies. Each and every one of them trembled and became absent-minded, unable to control themselves. The emperor-rank sword Aura Spirit's body also trembled. Its cold eyes revealed other emotions for the first time: fear. The terrifying sword domain also began to tremble. The heavenly desolation sword intent shattered and enveloped Chu-Mu's entire body. The sword Aura slashed onto it and suddenly trembled. It was bounced back by an extremely powerful force. The terrifying force caused the emperor-rank sword Aura Spirit's body to stiffen for a moment, unable to move. What Chu-Mu wanted was this opportunity. The second heavenly desolation sword intent appeared. Without the slightest hesitation, it shot out. The emperor-rank sword Aura Spirit's eyes flashed with fear and anger. It struggled, but because it was bounced back by the heavenly desolation sword intent, its body stiffened for a moment. Because it was locked onto by the heavenly desolation sword intent, it was unable to break free and react. It could only watch as the heavenly desolation sword intent shot towards its head. Its complicated eyes revealed despair, just like the sword of Gojoseon that it had previously slashed. The saint-rank heavenly desolation sword intent's terrifying power was not something the emperor-rank sword Aura Spirit could resist. Even if its strength was 10 times stronger, it would still be useless. Unless it was infinitely close to the saint rank, or even the saint rank. There was no if, no luck. In less than a 10,000th of a second, the heavenly desolation sword intent had struck the emperor-rank sword Aura Spirit's head and exploded. The terrifying power of the heavenly desolation sword intent, the corrosive power of the heavenly desolation sword intent, and the changing power of the heavenly desolation sword intent instantly engulfed the emperor-rank sword Aura Spirit's body. In just an instant, not even a blink of an eye, the emperor-rank sword Aura Spirit's body rapidly disintegrated. Like snow melting, it silently disappeared into nothingness, as if it had never appeared. As the emperor-rank sword Aura Spirit disappeared, the terrifying sword domain that enveloped the sword of Gojoseon also disappeared at the same time. Just as Chu-Mu let out a sigh of relief, a dot of light suddenly shot out from where the emperor-rank sword Aura Spirit disappeared. It shot towards Chu-Mu's abdomen and directly entered Chu-Mu's body. It was so fast that even Chu-Mu didn't detect it, let alone the remaining sword of Gojoseon. Of the 2,000 or so sword of Gojoseon, more than 1,500 had died under the emperor-rank sword Aura Spirit sword. In the end, only 500 had survived. Furthermore, all of them had pale faces, listless expressions, and weak auras. They still hadn't recovered from their shock. After being ravaged and massacred by the emperor-rank sword Aura Spirit, all of them were greatly affected. Just as their hearts were in despair, suddenly a huge change occurred. The powerful emperor-rank sword Aura Spirit was killed. Chapter 1040. Dead. The emperor-level sword Chi Spirit was finally dead. This terrifying devil was like a nightmare in everyone's hearts. Corpses were everywhere, and blood flowed like a river, dyeing the ground red. Broken limbs and broken bodies were shocking and disgusting. It was like a slaughterhouse. It took a long time for the living Sword Kings to regain their senses. However, each and every one of them still had a look of lingering fear. Their faces were pale as they looked at the broken limbs and pools of blood all over the ground. Then, they all looked at Chu Mu with even more fear. Although it was only for a moment, they all saw that Chu Mu had killed the Emperor-level Sword Chi spirit. They were sure that it wasn't Chu Mu's strength. If Chu Mu had that kind of strength, he wouldn't have been able to enter the true energy secret realm. Thus, that was a trump card that was hidden very deeply. Everyone present was a sword of Gojosian. They could feel that it was sword intent. It was an elemental sword intent that had reached the saint level. Saint-level sword intent. As soon as these words appeared in their minds, they were suppressed like a mountain, causing their consciousness to almost collapse. This meant that there was at least a middle-level sword saint behind Chu Mu. Moreover, he was highly valued by that middle-level sword saint. Otherwise, that middle-level sword saint wouldn't have left at least 2 saint-level sword intents in Chu Mu's mind. One had to know that if a sword saint gave someone a saint-level sword intent, it was equivalent to cutting their own sword intent. Firstly, it was very painful. Secondly, the damage was very obvious. It would take a long time to recover. Now, they couldn't be sure if Chu Mu still had a saint-level sword intent. They couldn't make any wild guesses. Especially now, every sword of Gojosian had used a secret technique and taken a pill. After the duration was over, the side effects appeared. They were also heavily injured. Their strength was less than 10% of their usual. However, Chu Mu looked much better than them. If he had evil intentions, the consequences, just thinking about it made them shudder. Why don't we recover from our injuries first? An advanced sword of Gojosian said. He was no longer as arrogant as before. When he spoke, he even looked at Chu Mu, as if asking for Chu Mu's opinion. The other advanced sword of Gojosian did not say anything. Chu Mu was surprised, but then he nodded. He roughly knew what these high-level sword of Gojosian were thinking. He also needed to recover, so he naturally wouldn't refuse. The remaining 500 or so sword of Gojosian sat down cross-legged, took out various pills, and began to cultivate 1 supreme-grade True Yuan tree and 8 upper-grade True Yuan trees were undamaged. Because of the previous battle, the True Yuan trees and True Yuan fruits were not affected by the sword realm of the Emperor-level Sword Chi spirit. 2 hours later, the sword of Gojosian opened their eyes. Chu Mu's injuries had long been completely healed by the life force of the wood form origin. He had also taken the Bloodyang pill to recover his essence blood. His divine sense had also mostly recovered. Now he was almost back to his usual peak state. On the other hand, the other Sword Kings all had side effects after using secret techniques and taking pills. Especially when the 2 of them were stacked, the side effects were even stronger. After that, they were also heavily injured. 2 hours wasn't enough for them to completely recover. At most, they would be able to recover around 60%. However, they would be able to move freely. Other than the 13 advanced sword of Gojosian, most of the surviving sword of Gojosian were intermediate sword of Gojosian. A few of them were low sword of Gojosian. Chu Mu and Bawang were undoubtedly the 2 most eye-catching ones. Especially Chu Mu. He was the center of attention. Thank you, Brother Chu, for saving our lives. An advanced sword of Gojosian cupped his hands towards Chu Mu and said. Facing Chu Mu, the arrogance in his heart disappeared. Indeed, they were advanced sword of Gojosian. Chu Mu was only a 2-star sword of Gojosian, but here in a one-on-one battle, they were at most 50 to 60% of their strength. They might not be Chu Mu's match. Outside, they were stronger than Chu Mu. Don't forget that Chu Mu had the protection of at least an intermediate sword saint behind him. Moreover, it was the kind of intermediate sword saint that could split off his own saint-level sword intent to protect him. Whoever killed Chu Mu would have to suffer the wrath of that unknown intermediate sword saint. Looking at everything, Chu Mu had the qualifications to be on equal footing with them. Moreover, they were able to survive because Chu Mu had used 2 saint-level sword intents to kill the emperor-level sword Chi spirit. Chu Mu's loss was huge. The other sword of Gojoseon also expressed their gratitude towards Chu Mu. Every sword of Gojoseon had grown through countless battles and slaughters. After their minds recovered, the broken limbs in front of them were no longer in their eyes. Let's begin to distribute the true energy fruits. A high-tier sword of Gojoseon said as his gaze fell on the true energy tree. The other sword of Gojoseon also became excited. Originally, there were more than 2,000 sword of Gojoseon. After distributing the true energy fruits, they didn't get much. Now that there were only 500 left, they would get even more. However, the low-tier sword of Gojoseon were all gloomy. Brother Chu, how do you think the true energy fruits should be distributed? A high-tier sword of Gojoseon looked at Chu Mu and asked. Originally, Chu Mu would at most get some high-rank true energy fruits. But the current situation was different. Let's pick the true energy fruits first, then discuss the distribution. Chu Mu thought and said, well, let's follow Brother Chu's idea. Then, let's ask Brother Chu to pick the true energy fruits. The high-tier sword of Gojoseon said, what do you think? We can rest assured that Brother Chu will do it. Perhaps under other circumstances, they wouldn't agree, but now they were all grateful and in awe of Chu Mu, so they thought so. Chu Mu didn't refuse. His figure flashed and rushed to the true energy tree. He first passed the high-rank true energy tree and came to the peak rank true energy tree without any danger. Holding a sharp sword in each hand, he continuously slashed out like a storm. One peak rank true energy fruit after another was cut off by Chu Mu's sword light. Then, wrapped in the power of divine sense, they floated to the side, allowing the other sword of Gojoseon to see clearly. In fact, even if Chu Mu took 1 or 2 peak rank true energy fruits, no one would say anything. However, Chu Mu disdained to do so. After picking the peak rank true energy fruits, it was time to pick the high rank true energy fruits. The connection between the true energy fruits and the tree branches was very tough. The power of divine sense couldn't pick them at all. Chu Mu's speed was extremely fast. In less than half a quarter of an hour, all the true energy fruits on the 8 high-rank true energy trees were picked clean. The true energy fruits were wrapped in Chu Mu's divine sense and divided into 2 piles, one big and one small. They were the peak rank true energy fruits and the high rank true energy fruits. Carrying the 2 piles of true energy fruits, Chu Mu flew to the front of the crowd. He swept out his sword and cleared out an empty space for the true energy fruits to fall. There are a total of 3,783 peak rank true energy fruits. Chu Mu said to the crowd, there are a total of 19,330 high rank true energy fruits. How do you think we should distribute them? How about this? I have a suggestion. A high-ranked sword of Gojoseon spoke up. He looked around, and his gaze fell on Chu Mu's face. Originally, the 13 of us would each get 3,783 peak rank true energy fruits, and then each of us would get 1,000 high rank true energy fruits. Now we have to change it. Brother Chu is also qualified to share the peak rank true energy fruits equally. I have no objections. Many of the high-ranked sword of Gojoseon expressed that they would not be ungrateful. They would treat it as repayment to Chu Mu. Even if 2 or 3 of them were unhappy, it was useless to object. Instead, they would be seen through, so they might as well acquiesce. Those mid-ranked sword of Gojoseon and low-ranked sword of Gojoseon naturally did not have any objections. In fact, they did not dare to dream about the peak rank true energy fruits. As for the high rank true energy fruits, each of us 14 will get 500 high rank true energy fruits. The remaining 12,000 will be divided among you. The mid-ranked sword of Gojosian will get more, and the low-ranked sword of Gojosian will get less. In addition, the spatial rings of the more than 1,000 dead sword of Gojosian will not be taken by the 14 of us. They will be divided equally among you. After speaking in one breath, he looked at Chu Mu. Brother Chu, what do you think? All right. Chu Mu did not refute. The spatial rings of the other sword of Gojosian might have some good things. However, the high-ranked sword of Gojosian would not be interested in them. Chu Mu was also dispensable. On the other hand, the high-ranked true energy fruits were more important. With this distribution, the dissatisfaction of those mid-ranked and low-ranked sword of Gojosian dissipated. Although they did not obtain many high-ranked true energy fruits, each person could obtain at least 3 spatial rings of the sword of Gojosian, expanding their wealth. No one objected. The distribution principle was thus established. Chu Mu finally obtained 273 peak rank true energy fruits and 250 high rank true energy fruits. The other high-ranked sword of Gojosian took the initiative to distribute the 3 extra peak rank true energy fruits to Shaoqin. Although he did not obtain a single spatial ring, the value of the peak rank true energy fruits and the high rank true energy fruits was immeasurable. Every sword of Gojosian obtained something. Furthermore, it was something that surpassed what they obtained before the appearance of the Emperor rank sword Qi spirit. This made them very happy. They were also very glad that they were able to survive and obtain these fruits instead of becoming the severed limbs on the ground. At this point, everything of value in the True Essence Hall had been swept clean by everyone. It was a pity that there were no spirit garden pearls. Otherwise, they could have transplanted the True Essence trees. The next time they wanted to obtain true energy fruits, they would have to wait for the next opening of the True Essence Secret Realm. That would be another 100 years later. 100 years was actually not a short time. No one knew what it would be like in 100 years. Grasping the present was the most important thing. More than 2,000 people had entered the True Essence Hall. In the end, only 500 people had survived. The difference was huge. However, when they thought about how they had encountered the Emperor rank sword Qi spirit, they rejoiced. In history, the sword of Gojosian that had encountered the Emperor rank sword Qi spirit had all been annihilated. A whistling sound rang out, and a storm appeared in the back hall of the True Essence Hall. Then, a spatial door appeared once again. The sword of Gojosian glanced at the back of the hall that was filled with broken corpses and blood. They did not even look back as they stepped into the spatial door. They swore that they did not want to enter a second time. The Emperor rank sword Qi spirit had left a deep impression on them. Chapter 1041. Brother Chu, if there's a chance, I'll treat you to a drink, a high-level sword of Gojosian said to Chu Mu. With that said, it flew up and left the True Essence Hall. Brother Chu, goodbye. After leaving the True Essence Hall, the 500 or so sword of Gojosian signaled to Chu Mu to leave, either alone or in groups. In the end, only Chu Mu and Bawang were left. As a Class 2 Beast King with extraordinary strength, Bawang was also given the spatial rings of the 3 dead sword of Gojosian and 20 upper-grade True Essence fruits. Chu Mu had already checked. The energy contained within an upper-rank True Yuan fruit was 100 times more than a lower-rank True Yuan fruit. The quality was also 100 times more than a lower-rank True Yuan fruit. Theoretically speaking, a single upper-rank True Yuan fruit contained the same amount of energy as 10,000 lower-rank True Yuan fruits. However, low-grade True Essence fruits were only suitable for low-level sword of Gojosian, while upper-grade True Essence fruits were suitable for high-level sword of Gojosian. 10,000 times the value was just an assumption. Generally, no one would exchange for it. Even if they did, it would be more than 10,000 times, maybe 12,000 times, or even higher. Unless absolutely necessary, only a fool would be willing to exchange upper-grade True Essence fruits for low-grade True Essence fruits. In any case, the 20 upper-grade true essence fruits that Boang had obtained were worth more than 200,000 low-grade true essence fruits. The only pity was that, although Boang's body was strong, he didn't dare to take upper-grade true essence fruits to increase his strength. The energy contained in one upper-grade true essence fruit was enough to make his body explode. For the time being, Boang couldn't take upper-grade true essence fruits to increase his strength. Similarly, Chu Mu couldn't take upper-grade true essence fruits to increase his sword energy, not to mention top-grade true essence fruits. After calculating his wealth, Xiao Chun found that he had more than 1,300 inferior-grade quintessence fruits. He had plucked some himself, but most of them were from the spatial rings of the sword of Gojoseon that he had killed. In terms of value, 500 high-grade true essence fruits were worth more than 5 million low-grade true essence fruits and 273 top-grade true essence fruits. The energy contained in one top-grade true essence fruit was equivalent to 100 high-grade true essence fruits. In other words, 273 top-grade true essence fruits were equivalent to at least 27,300 high-grade true essence fruits. How many low-grade true essence fruits would that be? There was no need to count. Even if all the inferior grade quintessence fruits in the entire quintessence secret realm were added together, it would still be far from enough. Chu Mu obviously would not exchange a top-grade true essence fruit for a low-grade true essence fruit. He was not stupid enough to do so. For the time being, the 500 high-grade vital essence fruits and the 273 supreme-grade vital essence fruits could only be stored for now. After he broke through to the fourth heavenly layer of Fate Realm, he would consume the high-grade vital essence fruits to increase his sword origin and improve his cultivation. Shortly after, Chu Mu sighed. Although he had obtained a lot of benefits, he could not convert them into true strength. He had to prepare for the future. As for himself, he had paid a huge price. Of the 3 strands of Heaven Wasteland Sword intent that the third palace master of the Heaven Wasteland Earth Palace left for him, he had already used up 2 of them. There was only 1 strand left. That was the Heaven Wasteland Sword intent that could block the full power attack of a low-level sword saint and threaten their life. Even if he felt heartache, he could not do anything about it. In that situation, if he continued to hide his strength, he would only be killed by the Emperor-level sword energy spirit. In any case, he had gained a lot. Aside from true essence fruits, he had also obtained many top-grade quintessence crystals. Unfortunately, the low-grade Berserk Thunder Sacred Sword was damaged. Focusing his mind, he informed Boang and flew into the air. Although the True Essence Hall was closed, the True Essence Secret Realm was not. He could still continue to explore and find more True Essence fruits, even if they were low-grade ones. As he flew, Chu Mu suddenly felt that he had missed something. Stopping to think carefully, Boang also stopped and looked at Chu Mu. "What is it?" Chu Mu frowned slightly. After a while, Chu Mu suddenly realized that he had missed something. That was, he was still using the divine, desolate sword art. The sword energy in his body was still the divine, desolate sword energy. "I can't feel the consumption of the divine, desolate sword energy." Chu Mu was very surprised. The divine, desolate sword art was a powerful secret technique. It had 2 side effects. The first was that the amount of sword energy was greatly reduced and could not be maintained for long. The second was the consumption. Even if he did not use it, it would continue to be consumed. Up until now, Chu Mu had used it many times. He was already very familiar with the feeling of the divine, desolate sword energy constantly being consumed. But just now, he did not feel the consumption of sword energy, not even the slightest bit. It was as if he had not used the divine, desolate sword art. When flying in the air, he relied more on the power of his spirit sense. The understanding and control of heaven and earth would consume a portion of the sword energy. It was a normal consumption. What's going on? Doubts filled his mind. Did something happen? He was actually in the state of the divine, desolate sword art, but his sword energy was not consumed like before. It was as if the cultivation technique he cultivated was not the heavenly desolate sword art, but the divine desolate sword art. That's not right. The divine desolate sword art was not a cultivation technique, but a secret technique. Chu Mu only felt that his mind was in a mess. This situation did not appear in the True Essence Hall. He only noticed it after leaving the True Essence Hall. In other words, the change happened in the True Essence Hall. Chu Mu began to think. He had to clear his thoughts and think clearly. When did this change begin? Although the sword energy was fixed at the divine, desolate sword energy, and like the heavenly desolate sword energy, it would not be consumed continuously, allowing his strength to be maintained at this level. This was a very happy thing. But whether there would be any side effects, Chu Mu did not know. The unknown was always worrisome. While thinking, Boang waited quietly by the side. Suddenly, the clouds above the True Essence secret realm surged and flowed rapidly, as if something was about to happen. It alarmed Chu Mu, who was in deep thought, and he looked up. The white clouds in the sky flowed like a river, and countless storms swept over. Following that, Chu Mu and Boang only felt that their bodies were locked by a tyrannical force. Before they could react, the sky and earth spun, and time flowed backwards. Everything changed and finally appeared outside the True Essence secret realm. Unknowingly, the True Essence secret realm closed. All the sword of Gojosian who were still alive were repelled by the power of the True Essence secret realm and sent out of it. One by one, the sword of Gojosian appeared outside the True Essence secret realm. They looked at each other in dismay. Obviously, the change was too fast for them to react. Well, the True Essence secret realm had closed. The next time it opened would be 100 years later. There was no need to stay any longer. The sword of Gojosian all moved and prepared to leave. This time, they had more or less gained something. Therefore, they planned to go into seclusion for a while to convert their strength before coming out to adventure. Chu Mu, you're not dead. A strange and surprised voice sounded. It sounded a little familiar. Chu Mu turned around and saw a face that disgusted him. It was one of the team members who had entered the True Essence secret realm with him. Li Quan, you're still alive. How can I die? Chu Mu replied indifferently. Hearing Chu Mu's words, Li Quan's face suddenly changed and anger surged up. Damn you, you think you can challenge me just because you're lucky enough to break through to the second sky of creation realm in the True Essence secret realm. Li Quan roared in exasperation, like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. The surrounding sword of Gojosian were instantly alarmed and looked over. A few of them, like Chu Mu, had come out of the True Essence Hall alive. They had seen Chu Mu's strength with their own eyes. It was extremely powerful, and it was not something a 2-star sword of Gojosian should have. Even the Samsung sword of Gojosian could not compare to him. Moreover, Chu Mu had used his trump card to kill the Emperor-level spirit of Sword Chi. Now, there was a Samsung sword of Gojosian shouting at Chu Mu. For a moment, the sword of Gojosian had a strange feeling. It was as if they had seen a ferocious dog baring its teeth at a ferocious tiger. I remember that I saved your life in the True Essence mystic realm, although I didn't do it on purpose. A faint smile hung on the corner of Chu Mu's mouth. With a bit of mockery, he looked at Li Quan and said neither slowly nor quickly, I didn't like you from the very beginning. However, in this world, no one can guarantee that everyone will like them. Therefore, I couldn't be bothered to pay attention to you. However, you targeted me time and time again. Even after I saved your life, you were still ungrateful and repaid my kindness with enmity. At that time, I thought that the next time I saw you, I would take back the life I saved you. Nonsense. You're boasting shamelessly. Li Quan was thoroughly enraged. It was as if a scar had been torn open. He flew into a rage out of humiliation and instantly erupted. He drew his sword and became one with the sword. He transformed into a swift and fierce swordlight that shot towards Chumu. His swift and fierce killing intent locked onto Chumu. From the looks of it, he planned to kill Chumu in one strike. Li Kuan's sudden attack surprised the surrounding Sword of Gojoseon. They looked at Chumu with pity in their eyes. Under the sudden attack of the Samsung Sword of Gojoseon, could a 2-star Sword of Gojoseon survive? Although the 2-star Sword of Gojoseon seemed to be a little unusual. As for the Sword Kings who had fought side by side with Chumu in the True Essence Palace, traces of mockery hung on the corners of their mouths. They clearly knew that Chumu's strength wasn't something that could be directly reflected by how many stars he had. Facing Li Kuan's fierce killing sword, Chumu's expression did not change. He did not panic at all. It seemed that he was scared silly because he could not react in time. But the truth? Soon it was revealed in front of everyone. Chumu would not show mercy to an ungrateful guy like Li Kuan who sought his own death. In an instant, the low-grade holy sword in Chumu's hand was unsheathed. A clanging sound entered everyone's ears. A perfect sword of light streaked across the sky, as if it could cut open heaven and earth. Yes, it was the beginning of the universe. It slashed towards the charging Li Kuan. With a poochie sound, Li Kuan flew past Chumu. Blood splattered and his head flew high. His eyes were filled with shock and disbelief. He could not believe that he, a Samsung Sword of Gojoseon, was killed by a 2-star Sword of Gojoseon. Chapter 1043. Li Kuan's death was just a small interlude, but it had attracted the attention of many Sword of Gojoseon. They stared at Chumu for a while, leaving a deep impression on him. They didn't want to offend such a genius Sword of Gojoseon, who didn't seem to have a high cultivation level but was actually very strong. In the Archean world, there were countless swordsmen. There weren't many Sword of Gojoseon who could challenge someone 1 star higher than them, and even fewer who could kill someone 1 star higher than them. Chumu's sharp and perfect sword had left a deep impression in the hearts of the Sword of Gojoseon. It was like a brand. Chumu put away Li Kuan's interspatial ring. He realized that the Sword of Gojoseon that entered the realm of true essence had more than 10,000 Sword of Gojoseon. Now, there weren't even 5,000 Sword of Gojoseon left. Almost half of them had died. The world of swordsmen was like this. If one wanted to gain something, they had to face the same dangers. If they could survive, they would die. It had been like this since ancient times. Battleships appeared one after another. Chumu and the other Sword of Gojoseon paid 100,000 upper-grade origin crystals and stepped onto the Heavenly Sword Hall's battleship. They left and returned to the West Tiger Sword Shrine. It would take about a month for the battleship to travel from the True Essence Mirror Lake to the West Tiger Sword Shrine. Staying in the room of the battleship, Chumu calmed down and prepared to check his body. He wanted to know what had happened to make the Tianhuang Sword Origin stay in the Divine Baron Sword Origin state and not consume energy continuously. As for Boang, he stayed in the room next to Chumu's to cultivate. He also had a cultivation method that was passed down from his bloodline. Of course, his cultivation speed would be slower. It was better to consume energy from flesh and blood. In the 3 interspatial rings that Boang was given, there were more than 1,000 low-grade true essence fruits in total. He was cultivating and eating low-grade true essence fruits at the same time. Although more than 1,000 low-grade true essence fruits weren't enough for him to become a level 3 Beast King, he could accumulate some energy and become stronger among level 2 Beast Kings. Dispelling all distracting thoughts, Zhang Xian focused his mind and sent his consciousness into his body. He sank into his dantian and prepared to check it out. The sword origin was located within the dantian. When the sword origin mutated, the dantian would more or less be affected. It was even possible that some unknown change had occurred in the dantian, causing the sword origin to mutate. Therefore, Chumu wanted to check the dantian first. When Chumu's consciousness sank into his dantian, it looked the same as before. However, When Chu Mu examined it carefully, he suddenly discovered that there was a small white ball of light at the top of his dantian. It was like a white sun. The ball of light emitted a weak white light that enveloped the sword origin below. The sword essence that was enveloped by the white light was the divine wilderness sword essence. So that's how it is. The reason why the sky wasteland sword essence is fixed in the state of the divine wasteland sword essence is because of this white ball of light. Chu Mu secretly nodded his head. After a question was answered, a new question popped up. This white ball of light, where did it come from? The change in the sword origin was clearly related to the white ball of light. The white ball of light should have been obtained in the true essence hall. Chu Mu began to recall. He was certain that the white ball of light was obtained after he entered the true essence hall. It could not have appeared out of nowhere. When I entered the front hall, when I used the divine wilderness sword art, I could feel the continuous consumption of the sword origin. It was the same in the middle hall when I was in the back hall. Chu Mu, who had his eyes closed, gradually entered a state of recollection. From the moment he stepped into the true essence hall, everything seemed to replay itself, as if he was experiencing it all again. Scene after scene, the battle in the front hall, the snatching of the yuan crystals in the middle hall, the joy when he saw the high-grade and top-grade true essence fruits in the back hall, the excitement when the Emperor rank sword chi spirit appeared, the shock and despair when facing the sword domain, and the terrifying Emperor rank sword chi spirit, countless blood, broken limbs, and finally, he used 2 sky wasteland sword intents to block one attack and kill the Emperor rank sword chi spirit. Chu Mu finally confirmed that the change in the sword origin did not appear when he was fighting the Emperor rank sword chi spirit. It only appeared after he killed the Emperor rank sword chi spirit. In other words, the white ball of light appeared after I killed the Emperor rank sword chi spirit. After thinking about it a few times, Chu Mu finally confirmed that the white ball of light appeared after he killed the Emperor rank sword chi spirit. The biggest possibility was that it was left behind after the Emperor rank sword chi spirit died, without knowing when it entered Chu Mu's dantian. From a certain point of view, it should be a gain. But whether this gain was good or bad, Chu Mu did not know. With a thought, the consciousness that circled around his dantian approached the white ball of light and directly touched it. If he wanted to know the mystery of the white ball of light, this seemed to be the only way. When Chu Mu's consciousness came into contact with the white ball of light, he felt a boundless, vigorous, and extremely pure yuan qi fluctuation. Immediately after, a change occurred. It was as if his consciousness was the key that awakened and activated the white ball of light. Chu Mu felt a boundless, vigorous, and irresistible power repelling his consciousness and pushing it away. Following that, the white ball of light released an extremely dazzling light, like a scorching sun shining down on the earth. Rays of white light pierced through the space in his dantian, like sharp swords filling the entire dantian world. The tyrannical divine wilderness sword essence formed a lake, facing the white, sword-like rays of light, could not resist at all. Chu Mu could only be anxious, unable to interfere. He could only watch helplessly as his dantian was pierced through by the white rays of light. Suddenly, an intense pain came from his dantian, surging through his entire body, causing his body to twitch uncontrollably. The pain was like his dantian was pierced, torn, and destroyed. It was extremely painful, causing his nerves to twitch and even his soul to twitch. Traces of fear emerged in his heart. The dantian was undoubtedly extremely important to a swordsman. It ran through every swordsman's life and was the carrier of sword essence. And sword essence was the foundation of a swordsman's strength. Everything ultimately required sword essence as a carrier. Without sword essence, a swordsman's divine sense, sword intent, and power of laws would still exist. But because of a lack of sword essence, he would not be able to use a complete sword technique. Once the dantian was damaged, a swordsman's path of the sword would come to an end. Now he was extremely worried that his dantian would be damaged or even broken. The intense pain nearly caused Chumu to faint, but he used his strong willpower to hold on, not allowing himself to faint. His consciousness had already been expelled from his dantian. Chumu was unable to sense the various changes in his dantian. He could only endure the tearing and twitching pain in his dantian and wait for the changes to end. Chumu did not have the slightest idea what would happen in the end. He was somewhat afraid. He was afraid that what he would see in the end would be a broken dantian. He might be able to recover, but it would take a large amount of time and energy. Without a doubt, it would greatly delay his progress, and he might not be able to recover, causing his path of the sword to come to an end. Under the torment of the pain and the fear of his dantian being damaged, every second felt like years. Breath after breath passed, making Chumu feel like it was a torture. The pain in his dantian was like a surging tide, and it was also a great test of his willpower. There were several times when Chumu was on the verge of losing consciousness, and he had to force himself to stay awake. Amidst the pain, Chumu clearly remembered the time. There had never been a time when he was so concerned about the passing of time. After a full 6 hours, half an hour, and 18 breaths of time, the pain in his dantian was finally alleviated. It weakened a little bit, allowing Chumu to let out a sigh of relief. After another quarter of an hour, the pain in his dantian had finally completely disappeared. Impatiently, Chumu's consciousness once again sank into his dantian. This time his consciousness was not pushed aside in the slightest, and it easily entered. As soon as he entered, Chumu was stunned. Was this still his dantian? His dantian was now vast like a field. Compared to the size of his dantian before, it had increased by 10 times, a full 10 times. 10 times. What kind of concept was that? When every swordsman first started cultivating, the size of their dantian was basically the same, unless it was a special case, such as having a naturally atrophied dantian, making it smaller than normal, or having a slightly larger dantian. But those were very, very few. As they broke through, the dantian would gradually expand and strengthen, and the ratio would basically be the same. The dantian was where power was stored, and the sword origin was located in the dantian. The size of the dantian was directly related to the amount of sword origin. The dantian of most swordsmen was the same size, so the amount of sword origin was about the same. Of course, the amount of sword origin was also related to the cultivation technique. Some powerful cultivation techniques could allow one to cultivate an even thicker sword origin. But whether it was a natural dantian abnormality or a high-level cultivation technique, there had never been a case where the capacity of the dantian was increased by 10 times. This meant that Chumu's sword origin could be increased by 10 times. The first change was that the size of his dantian had increased by 10 times. The second change was that the firmness of his dantian had also increased by 10 times. The third change was that the heavenly desolate sword origin had completely stabilized into the divine desolate sword origin. Chumu's first reaction to these 3 changes was to be happy. He was extremely happy and even excited. His dantian had expanded by 10 times, which meant that his sword origin could increase by 10 times. That was to say, the amount of sword origin could reach 10 times that of a sword of Gojosian of the same level. His current cultivation was at the second heavenly layer of creation. According to the normal ratio, the sword origin of a third heavenly layer of creation was several times that of a second heavenly layer of creation. In other words, the quantity of his sword origin had already exceeded the normal third heavenly layer of creation and was infinitely close to the standard of the fourth heavenly layer of creation. Of course, this did not mean that Chumu could approach a 4-star sword of Gojosian in terms of the power of sword origin. It was just that the difference in quantity allowed Chumu to have more powerful sword techniques. But the first and third points allowed the power of Chumu's sword origin to reach an abnormal level. The divine desolate sword origin was 10 times more powerful than the heavenly desolate sword origin. Most sword of Gojosian's sword origin were equivalent to the heavenly desolate sword origin, but were far inferior to the divine, desolate sword origin. Chapter 1044. The black warship was like an arrow that had been released from a bow as it flew above the West Lake region. It shuttled through countless clouds like a bolt of black lightning. This black warship was the warship of the West Tiger Sword Shrine. It was flying rapidly in the direction of the West Tiger Sword Shrine. Originally, there were quite a number of Sword of Gojosian that had gone to the True Essence Mirror Lake. Now, only more than half of the Sword of Gojosian had returned. Less than half of the Sword of Gojosian had remained in the True Essence Secret Realm forever. Every Sword of Gojosian that had returned alive had more or less gained something. Every one of them had increased their strength, be it in terms of cultivation or sword skills. Therefore, every one of them was meditating in their own rooms, causing the entire warship to be quiet. In the room, Chu Mu had a bitter look on his face. After great joy, there was often great sorrow. He was finally sure that the white ball of light in his dantian was his gain after killing the Emperor-level sword chi spirit. It could be said that it was the most valuable thing in the True Essence Hall. It was far more valuable than the supreme-grade True Essence fruits and the high-grade True Essence fruits. His dantian had been expanded and stabilized by 10 times. This meant that Chu Mu could hold more sword origin and withstand the impact of stronger sword origin. Furthermore, the Sky Desolate Sword Origin had completely transformed into Divine Desolate Sword Origin, which meant that the quality of the sword origin had increased by 10 times. This was permanent. It was not something that mere True Essence fruits could compare to. Even more than 3,000 supreme-grade True Essence fruits and nearly 20,000 high-grade True Essence fruits could not compare. Under the changes in his dantian, it meant that as long as Chu Mu filled up the sword origin, regardless of the quantity or quality of the sword origin, it could be compared to an ordinary fourth heavenly stage fortune, Sword of Gojosian. In other words, in the future, there would be no difference between him and an ordinary 4-star Sword of Gojosian in terms of cultivation. Coupled with his tyrannical body and powerful earth-quaking energy, if he were to erupt with the imperishable sword intent and the power of laws of the divine realm, it would be easy for him to defeat an ordinary 4-star Sword of Gojosian. He could even contend with an ordinary 5-star Sword of Gojosian, even if he only used the heaven-rank sword intent and the power of laws of the divine realm. It was not impossible for him to kill an ordinary 4-star Sword of Gojosian. In terms of sword techniques, an ordinary 5-star Sword of Gojosian was not his opponent. It was hard to imagine that a 2-star Sword of Gojosian strength was strong enough to contend with an ordinary 5-star Sword of Gojosian. This was simply a fantasy. At least, it was unheard of in the various territories of the immemorial world. Even in the immemorial battlefield, it was extremely rare. Such an increase in strength was naturally a good thing. To anyone, it was a great thing. Being able to celebrate for 3 days and 3 nights was a great thing. Chu Mu was also very happy, but now, after cultivating for a few days, he was distressed. 10 times the quantity, 10 times the quality, it was 100 times. In other words, if he wanted to accumulate the sword origin in his dantian to the level of an early second, heavenly stage fortune realm cultivator, and the quality of the divine desolate sword origin, he would have to use 100 times the usual energy to refine it. 2 difficult problems appeared. First, 100 times the energy supply. Second, the speed of refining. The efficiency of refining high-grade Yuanjing into heavenly desolate sword origin and refining high-grade Yuanjing into divine desolate sword origin were different. The difference was at least 5 times. Overall, the difficulty of Chu Mu's cultivation had increased by at least 500 times compared to before the transformation of his dantian. Of course, if his cultivation talent increased, the efficiency of refining would also increase. But no matter what, 100 times the energy supply was a fixed condition. Now that the difficulty of cultivating was 500 times, Chu Mu was extremely distressed. The energy contained in high-grade Yuanjing could no longer satisfy his needs. Chu Mu decisively used supreme-grade Yuanjing to cultivate. These supreme-grade Yuanjing were often used by high-grade sword of Gojosian to cultivate. There was no low-grade sword of Gojosian who dared to use supreme-grade Yuanjing to cultivate. This was because their bodies could not withstand it, especially their meridians. The energy contained in supreme-grade Yuanjing was much purer and more majestic than high-grade Yuanjing. It was at least 100 times stronger. Under the impact, the burden on the meridians was very obvious. If the meridians could not withstand it, they would shatter. The second problem was the dantian. The dantian of a low-grade sword of Gojosian could not withstand the impact of the supreme-grade Yuanjing's power. Even if Chu Mu's body was strong, he did not dare to absorb the energy of the supreme-grade Yuanjing too quickly. He controlled the speed. His meridians also felt waves of swelling. After the Yuanjing surged into his dantian, it also filled it. Fortunately, Chu Mu's dantian was 10 times stronger and could completely withstand it. Every time a swordsman made a breakthrough, their dantian would expand and become more stable. In this aspect, Chu Mu far surpassed swordsmen of the same level. Even if he used supreme-grade Yuanjing to cultivate, Chu Mu felt that the efficiency was too low. He did not know when he would be able to cultivate the sword origin in his dantian to the peak of his current cultivation. It was a mixture of sorrow and joy. Chu Mu thought of the Yuanjing fruit. Unfortunately, the power of a high-grade Yuanjing fruit was much stronger than that of a supreme-grade Yuanjing. His meridians could not withstand it. Unless his cultivation reached the 4th layer of Fortune Realm, his body would be even stronger, and his meridians would be even tougher. Only then would he be able to withstand it. Yuanjing liquid. I must find a way to buy Yuanjing liquid, Chu Mu said to himself. Yuanjing liquid was very pure, without any impurities. Moreover, the burden on the meridians after consuming it was much weaker than that of supreme-grade Yuanjing, making it easier to refine. The thought of buying Yuanjing liquid disappeared. Chu Mu once again took out supreme-grade Yuanjing and held it in his hand, continuing to absorb. Although the efficiency of cultivation was very, very low, it was still better than giving up when encountering difficulties. After all, many a little makes a mickle. There would always be a time when the Yuanjing liquid was full. At that time, his strength would be terrifyingly strong. Time flew by day. Soon, a month had passed. The black battleship landed on the West Tiger Sword Shrine. The sword of Gojosian left their rooms, landed on the battleship, and entered the heavenly sword shrine. After a month of bitter cultivation, Boang's aura had become much more vigorous and powerful. As for Chu Mu's aura, it did not change much. He had consumed over 1,000 low-grade Yuanjing fruits, but the divine wilderness sword origin in his dantian had increased a little. Compared to a month ago, it had increased by at least 30%. It was only a 30% increase. Compared to the current capacity of his dantian, it was insignificant. Regarding this, Chu Mu could not do anything. Who asked his dantian to undergo such a change? This was the reward for killing the Emperor rank spirit of Sword Qi. In the past, when the Emperor rank spirit of Sword Qi appeared, the sword of Gojosian that entered the true essence hall were all wiped out. Naturally, he would not receive any rewards. In fact, Chu Mu still had a question in his heart. When the Emperor rank spirit of Sword Qi appeared 3 times, the sword of Gojosian were all wiped out. No one came out alive, so the news was not brought out. However, there were all sorts of strange things in the world. It was not strange for an almighty to find out. However, what about the corpses of the dead, sword of Gojosian? What about their interspatial rings? Thinking about it, the true essence hall was mysterious. The corpses of the sword of Gojosian and their interspatial rings should have all disappeared. Chu Mu did not know what exactly happened, so he did not think too much about it. Striding into the front hall of the West Tiger Sword Shrine, Chu Mu glanced around. He was thinking about how he should purchase the essence liquid. Purchasing the essence liquid was not an easy task. It was basically monopolized. Chumu could not find any way. Suddenly, Chumu saw someone waving at him. His eyes lit up. It was actually senior brother Qintiani. Chumu strode over and gave a sword salute to Qintiani. You don't have to be so polite. Qintiani smiled and gestured for Chumu to sit down. He looked deeply at Chumu and nodded with a smile. In just over a year, your cultivation has actually broken through from the first layer to the second layer. Your strength must have increased a lot. Senior brother has good eyesight. Chumu said. What's your next goal? Qintiani asked casually. His tone was gentle. Firstly, Chumu was a disciple of the Flying Heaven Pavilion. Secondly, he recognized Chumu's talent, so his attitude was naturally very good. Naturally, it's to improve my cultivation. Chumu smiled, and an idea flashed through his mind. Senior brother Qin, I have something I want to ask. Speak. Qintiani said. Senior brother Qin, do you know where I can buy essence liquid? Chumu asked bluntly. Essence liquid. Qintiani looked at Chumu and did not find it strange. Essence liquid is extremely valuable. It's not that easy to buy. I just came out of the Zhanyuan secret realm and obtained some top-grade essence crystals. However, the efficiency of using essence liquid to cultivate is faster than using essence crystals. Therefore, I plan to buy some essence liquid to cultivate. Chumu said simply. Zhanyuan secret realm. Qintiani's eyes flashed with a trace of nostalgia. He had also been to the Zhanyuan secret realm, so he immediately recovered. It seems that your harvest is not small. How much essence liquid do you want? The more the better. Chumu said. With his dantian's current condition, he indeed needed a large amount of essence liquid. The more the better. Qintiani couldn't help but feel astonished. Half a kilogram of yuan liquid required at least 12,000 top-quality yuan crystals to purchase. Yet, half a kilogram of yuan liquid was far from enough for Chumu, whose cultivation talent wasn't high. He needed at least 30 to 40 kilograms to reach the second layer peak from the second layer initial stage. If he wanted to reach the third layer, he needed another 30 to 40 kilograms. After breaking through to the third layer, the amount of essence liquid needed would increase again. 100 gene of essence liquid was equivalent to 1,200,000 top-grade essence crystals. Qintiani felt that even if Chumu went to the Zhanyuan secret realm, with his cultivation and strength, he wouldn't be able to obtain too many benefits. When he heard Chumu say that the more the better, his expression became a little strange. Junior brother Chu, the West Tiger Territory's essence liquid is often monopolized. It's not easy to buy it. Qintiani pondered for a moment before saying, however, it's not like there's no way. There are places in the Grand Chaos Territory that sell essence liquid. If you want to buy a large amount, you have to go there. Actually, without waiting for Chumu to answer, Qintiani continued, if junior brother wants to cultivate faster, it's better to enter the primordial battlefield. The environment there is more suitable for cultivation. Chapter 1045. The blue sky and white clouds were like a sword piercing through the sun, shooting towards the earth. The red battleship was like a scarlet bolt of lightning that tore through the sky. Even the sunlight was torn apart. It flew forward rapidly, breaking through the sea of clouds, leaving behind a long trail. This red battleship took off from the Western Tiger Territory. Its destination was the Great Chaos Territory. Chumu was on this battleship, heading towards the Great Chaos Territory. Boang did not go with Chumu. Previously, when he found out that Chumu's dantian had mutated, he felt that the gap between his strength and Chumu's had widened. Thus, he proposed the idea of training by himself. Only then would he be able to quickly grow in this life and death situation. Putting himself in Bawang's shoes, Chumu agreed with Bawang's decision to let him go alone. Perhaps the next time they met, Boang's strength would have become extremely tyrannical, becoming his true left and right arms. Standing in front of the battleship, the chaotic airflow was split by the battleship's impact. The airflow flew from left to right. The sealing power allowed Chumu to clearly see the airflow rapidly flowing like a river. From the starting point to the destination, it would take a total of 3 months. Chumu did not stay in the battleship's room all the time. Sometimes he would come out for a walk, looking at the thousands of miles of sky, emptying his mind and relaxing his mind. There were a total of over 1,000 swordsmen on this battleship. There was a sword of Gojosian, and almost all of them were sword of Gojosian. There were a few divine condensation realm swordsmen who had extraordinary statuses. They were guarded by 2 or 3 sword of Gojosian. The great chaotic territory was several times larger than the Western Tiger territory. There are humans and other races in this great chaotic territory. They killed each other, and battles could break out at any time. It was very chaotic, and that was how it got its name. Every person who rode on the battleship had to pay 200,000 high-grade origin crystals as a fee. To Chumu, 200,000 high-grade origin crystals was like a drop in the ocean. Retracting his gaze, he turned around and walked back into the cabin. Returning to his room, he closed the door and cleared his mind. Removing all distracting thoughts, he took out a piece of top-grade origin crystal and activated the new Divine Wilderness Sword Manual to cultivate. Originally, the Divine Wilderness Sword Art was a secret technique, while the Heavenly Wilderness Sword Art was a cultivation technique. The change in his dantian had caused the Heavenly Wilderness Sword Essence to completely transform into the Divine Wilderness Sword Essence. Just using the Heavenly Wilderness Sword Art alone was unable to change it. So Chumu integrated the Divine Wilderness Sword Art into the Heavenly Wilderness Sword Art to change it. This process was not difficult for him. Because his perception was extremely high, his mastery of the Sky Desolate Sword Art and the Divine Desolate Sword Art had reached a profound level. After spending some time, he combined the two, using the Sky Desolate Sword Art as the main body, and fusing the profound meaning of the Divine Desolate Sword Art into a new cultivation technique. He named it the Divine Desolate Sword Art and specialized in cultivating the Divine Desolate Sword Essence. The golden Divine Wilderness Sword Essence flowed in his meridians, constantly absorbing the energy of the top-grade Yuanjing and transforming it. His meridians emitted a swelling feeling. Even though the difficulty of cultivating now was 500 times more difficult than before, Chumu could not give up on cultivating. Otherwise, his cultivation would stop there and he would not be able to advance even an inch. Cultivating the sword essence, comprehending the laws of sword techniques, cultivating the Flying Heaven defensive sword art, and cultivating sword techniques. He had to allocate a certain amount of time every day. Currently, his cultivation was at the early stage of the second heaven of creation realm. He did not know when he would be able to advance to the middle stage, let alone the third heaven. He had mastered 5 types of laws: void law, metal law, wind law, water law, and lightning law. His sword techniques were the 4 moves: /iron break wind, /wind, and wild thunder break. The Flying Heaven defensive sword art was at the small success stage, and his sword techniques had reached the peak of the 10th level of the sword technique domain and the early stage of the divine realm. Chumu always felt that there was not enough time. Just the transformation and mastery of the laws alone required a lot of time. There was also the remastery of the sword techniques, which also required a lot of time. As for the cultivation of the Flying Heaven defensive sword art and sword techniques, as well as the improvement of his cultivation, Chumu wished that one day could become 10 days or even 100 days. He could not help but sigh inwardly. It would be great if he still had a large amount of high-grade sand of time. Unfortunately, he had used up all of them. Now his cultivation was at a tortoise-like speed, which made Chumu feel very helpless. The red battleship tore through the air and advanced rapidly. Dark clouds covered the sky and the sun. Amidst the rumbling sounds, purple-red lightning bolts shuttled through the clouds like flood dragons. When they appeared, they gave off a horrifying aura. Chumu happened to walk out of the cabin and looked up at the sky. The wind and clouds changed color, and the dark clouds pressed down as if the sky was about to collapse. The purple-red thunderbolts and lightning were suffocating. All of a sudden, countless tiny dots appeared and fell from the sky. Each dot was the size of an egg. They were raindrops, and when they hit the seal around the battleship, they created ripples that spread out. Pa, pa, pa! The sounds were dense and endless like the beating of a drum. Although it didn't land on his body, through the ripples of the seal, Chumu could estimate that each raindrop had at least 1,000 kilograms of force when it hit the seal on the warship. Just the thought of it was terrifying. Each raindrop had a force of 1,000 Jin. If it hit a person, not to mention an ordinary person, even a Chi Transformation Realm swordsman would not be able to escape death. Even a Chi Sea Realm swordsman would most likely be injured. When the raindrops fell on the seal of the battleship, tiny ripples appeared. It was endless, making the seal look very interesting. Countless ripples covered the seal above the battleship. It felt as if they were in a world of water. Looking up at the seal, looking at the ripples that faded and disappeared, it was like a world of its own. Unknowingly, Chumu was immersed in it. With his hands behind his back, he looked up at the sky. His eyes became deep as he stared at the countless ripples on the seal. It was as if he had turned into a statue. Traces of mysterious chi spread out from Chumu's body and circled around him. Not far away, a few sword of Gojosian's eyes lit up. They looked at Chumu with envy. At this moment, Chumu had entered a strange state. This state was called enlightenment. Enlightenment was something that could only be found by chance. Some swordsmen would only have a few moments of enlightenment in their entire life, but some swordsmen would have frequent enlightenment. Every time they had enlightenment, even if their strength did not increase significantly, it would still bring great benefits. Some of these benefits were directly shown, while others were hidden and slowly revealed. In short, enlightenment was very rare. It could not be disturbed. Otherwise, it would be a great enmity. No one was willing to make enemies for no reason, especially when there was no conflict of interest. Therefore, the surrounding sword of Gojosian retreated. However, after seeing Chumu's appearance, two of the sword of Gojosian stood guard for Chumu. Many swordsmen also looked up at the countless ripples in the sky, hoping that they could also enter the state of enlightenment. However, enlightenment was something that could only be found by chance. Chumu's eyes were deep and mysterious. They were calm, like the surface of a lake without ripples. It was as if he had merged with the seal of the battleship. Soon after, layers of ripples rippled out from his eyes and slowly spread out. Those raindrops seemed to have directly landed on his pupils. Traces of enlightenment appeared in Chumu's mind. In an instant, everything in front of him seemed to have changed. The dark clouds in the sky seemed to have turned into an army wearing black armor and holding black longswords. They were disciplined and well-trained. They were invincible, ready to attack everything. No one could stop them. With a command, the black longsword was unsheathed and slashed out. Sword after sword transformed into droplets of rain that fell from the sky. In an instant, Chumu only felt that he was facing countless attacks. Endless sword techniques were unleashed, wanting to assassinate him. Alone, holding a sharp sword in his hand, he stood in the air, facing an army of thousands of men and horses, facing countless killing sword techniques. Chumu's heart was not only unafraid, but instead surged with a heroic spirit. His heroic spirit soared to the skies as he held the sharp sword in his hand. With a flick of his wrist, the sword hummed as if it was excited. Even if there are thousands of people, I will go. The sword intent soared into the sky. The sharp sword was swung out. It was simple, without any smoke or fire, but it seemed to have cut open the darkness and the sky. Under the sword, many raindrops were shattered turning into powder. However, the raindrops were endless. Wave after wave, they seemed to be getting fiercer and fiercer. The sword techniques were getting more and more exquisite. Chu Mu held the sword and danced in the sky. He slashed, stabbed, and stabbed. All kinds of sword techniques were used. The pressure he faced was getting stronger and stronger. In the outside world, his body did not move at all. Only the aura around his body was sometimes fast, sometimes slow, sometimes rapid, sometimes gentle, sometimes majestic, sometimes subtle, all kinds of different. Countless raindrops were shattered wave after wave. Countless sword techniques were broken one by one. Chu Mu was like a god of sword techniques. None of the sword techniques could get close to him. Unknowingly, his mind flashed through the true energy secret realm. The sword techniques of every sword chi spirit that he had fought and even seen with his own eyes. From the most common level 1 sword chi spirit to the level 2 sword chi spirit, the level 3 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 sword chi spirit, and the level 3 sword chi spirit, the level 3 sword chi spirit, the level 3 sword chi spirit, and the level 3 sword chi spirit, 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 the level 3 sword. Their sword techniques were simple and shallow, to concise and profound. They were unfathomable and advanced layer by layer. That day, when he fought with the sword chi spirits and watched the monarch level sword chi spirit and emperor level sword chi spirit, Chu Mu had only absorbed a part of it. Today, the sudden epiphany made him feel like he was facing an army of thousands of men and horses. He absorbed all the sword techniques that he had seen and used them for his own use. His sword techniques that had reached a bottleneck started to improve slightly. It was as if he was fighting against the entire world with his own strength. Facing such immense pressure, his potential was slowly being developed under these layers of terrifying pressure. What a powerful aura! The swordsmen around were surprised by the aura emitted from Chu Mu's body. It was getting stronger and fiercer. He was like an unsheathed divine sword, sharp and unstoppable. The speed of the battleship was extremely fast. Soon it flew over the dark cloud area. The bright light shone through the seal and fell on Chu Mu's face. Chu Mu suddenly woke up. What a pity! If I had more time to comprehend it, my sword techniques would definitely improve again. Chu Mu thought to himself. Then he smiled. He had gained a lot. His sword techniques had finally improved from the early stage of the God Realm to the middle stage of the God Realm. Chapter 1046. Thank you for protecting me just now. Chu Mu cupped his hands and smiled. Brother Chu, you're being too polite. If it weren't for Brother Chu, we brothers would have already died in the true essence Great Hall. Xia Zixiong slowly spoke, and Xia Ziwei repeatedly nodded his head. Because of their relationship as protectors, Chu Mu knew these two people. Xia Zixiong and Xia Ziwei were brothers, and they were twins. They looked very similar, but the color of their robes was different. Xia Zixiong was the elder and wore a fiery red robe, while Xia Ziwei was the younger and wore a light blue robe. Although their appearances were almost the same, their temperaments were completely different. Xia Zixiong was more calm, while Xia Ziwei was more quick-witted. After chatting for a while, they had a preliminary understanding of each other. Xia Zixiong and Xia Ziwei were from the Xia family of Donghua City in the big territory of chaos. They were the first and second young masters of the Xia family. Although they didn't mention their ages, they looked quite young. probably less than 100 years old. Their cultivation was at the third sky of creation. They had passed by the West Tiger Territory to go to the True Essence Secret Territory, and now they were returning to the Xia family of Donghua City in the big territory of chaos. It was fate that brought them together. These two brothers were quite straightforward and weren't very shrewd, so Chumu was happy to make friends with them. By the way, Brother Chu, if you don't have anything important to do in the big territory of chaos, why don't you come with us to the Xia family? We'll treat you well, Xia Ziwei said with a smile. My purpose in coming to the big territory of chaos is to buy some liquefied yuan. Chumu thought for a moment. The Xia brothers were swordsmen born and raised in the big territory of chaos. They knew more about the big territory of chaos than he did. Instead of trying to figure it out himself, he might as well ask them for advice. It might save him more time. Besides, buying liquefied yuan wasn't a secret. Buying liquefied yuan? Brother Chu, you've asked the right people. Xia Ziwei smiled proudly. Coincidentally, there's a Donghua Tower in Donghua City that sells all kinds of things, including liquefied yuan. Previously, Xia Ziwei had wanted to say that they could just give him whatever he wanted. But after thinking about it, even if they wanted to obtain it, it wouldn't be easy. What could they give him? When we arrive at Donghua City, Ziwei, take Brother Chu to Donghua Tower. I will return to my family first, Xia Zixiong instructed. No problem, brother. Leave it to me. Xia Ziwei patted his chest and said, Then I'll have to trouble Brother Ziwei, said Chumu. 3 months later, the battleship landed. Under the guidance of the Xia brothers, Chumu headed for Donghua City, which was not far away. Compared to the western Tiger Great region, the aura of the Great Chaotic region was much more heterogeneous. This was because this place was more chaotic and battles frequently occurred, causing the heaven and earth yuan qi to be more chaotic. Walking on the land of the big chaos territory and breathing in the air of the big chaos territory, one would feel a sense of desperation and tension. It was as if one had to be vigilant and ready to fight at any time in this place. Donghua City was like an ancient giant beast lying on the ground of the big chaos territory, sleeping. It exuded an ancient and vigorous aura. As it breathed, it seemed as if a long river of time and space flowed through it. The huge city wall, which was hundreds of meters high, was like a natural moat that separated the inside and outside of the city. Countless seals were set up to protect the city wall and the sky above Donghua City. Flying was forbidden in Donghua City. If one wasn't careful, one could be killed by the countless seals in the sky and die a miserable death. The Xia family had some prestige in Donghua City. Therefore, when entering the city, they didn't need to pay any fees. Xia Zixiong went to the Xia family, while Xia Ziwei took Chumu to the so-called Donghua Tower. Along the way, Xia Ziwei also introduced the origin of Donghua Tower to Chumu. In short, Donghua Tower was the force that no one dared to provoke in Donghua City. Even if all the clans in Donghua City joined forces, they would not dare to go against Donghua Tower because Donghua Tower had a shocking background. Brother Chu, you must have heard of the real Dragon Dynasty, Xia Ziwei said. A trace of respect flashed across his face. It was respect for the real Dragon Dynasty. Chumu nodded. He didn't know before, but after the Heavenly Creation platform, he knew because Long Zun came from the real Dragon Dynasty and was the crown prince of the dynasty. The real Dragon Dynasty is the top force of the Big Chaos Territory. It is also the commander of the human clan in the Big Chaos Territory. It is also because of the command of the real Dragon Dynasty that we can live and live in the Big Chaos Territory, Xia Ziwei said. Donghua Tower is a station of the real Dragon Dynasty in Donghua City. At the same time, it sells all kinds of resources. Chumu nodded. So, Donghua Tower belonged to the real Dragon Dynasty. No wonder no one in Donghua City dared to provoke it. The first floor of Donghua Tower only sells ordinary things. The second floor sells more precious things, like liquefied origin energy. I have never bought it, but it is said that it is only sold on the 5th floor. Xia Ziwei led Chu Mu to Donghua Tower as he explained the rules of Donghua Tower. It is said that low-level sword of Gojosian can go up to the 4th floor, but only mid-level sword of Gojosian can go up to the 5th floor. If a low-level sword of Gojosian wants to go up, he must fight his way up with his strength. Fight his way up! Chu Mu was slightly stunned. This Donghua Tower was quite interesting. If a low-level sword of Gojosian wants to enter the 5th floor, he must at least have the strength of a 4-star sword of Gojosian. I think that with Brother Chu's strength, you might be able to enter the 5th floor, Xia Ziwei said. However, with me there is no need to challenge. Although Donghua Tower is backed by the real Dragon Dynasty in Donghua City, they will more or less give us some face. After chatting for a while, the two of them arrived at the entrance of Donghua Tower. Donghua Tower had a total of 6 floors. It covered a large area, and each floor was dozens of meters high. It stood on the ground and was very eye-catching. There were many people coming and going at the entrance. There were Sword of Gojosian in the creation realm and swordsmen in the divine condensation realm. Ever since his cultivation broke through to the creation realm, he rarely paid attention to swordsmen below the creation realm. After all, they were not on the same level. Xia Ziwei was the second young master of the Xia clan. As soon as he entered Donghua Tower, someone came to greet him. It was a middle-aged man with a genial face. He was a little fat. "Young Master Xia, what brings you here?" The middle-aged fat man smiled widely. "Shopkeeper Hua, long time no see. You have gained weight again," Xia Ziwei teased. Xia Ziwei teased. It seemed that this middle-aged fatty was quite familiar with him. In fact, as a shopkeeper of Donghua Tower, Xia Ziwei was quite familiar with the more famous people in Donghua City. As a businessman, harmony was the key to making money. If there was no need to, there would not be any conflicts. Although Donghua Tower was backed by the real Dragon Dynasty, in the end, Donghua Tower was a business. Harmony was the most important thing. Naturally, they had to build a good relationship with the forces in Donghua City. "Young Master Xia, you must be joking. This is..." Shopkeeper Hua smiled carelessly and looked at Chu Mu. Anyone who came with Xia Ziwei could not be ordinary. "This is Chu Mu's brother Chu. He is not ordinary. He is the first disciple on the creation tablet in the West Tiger territory," Xia Ziwei immediately introduced. The creation tablet in the West Tiger territory is famous. He is the first disciple of the creation tablet. He is a dragon among men. Shopkeeper Hua's exclamation was just right. It gave people a sense of heartfelt admiration and did not seem fake. It made people feel comfortable. "I am Hua Zhongxia, and I am the shopkeeper of Donghua Tower. Brother Chu, you can call me Shopkeeper Hua." He was a businessman and had the demeanor of a swordsman. "Shopkeeper Hua, although this brother of mine is a 2-star sword of Gojosian, his strength is more powerful than the average Samsung sword of Gojosian," Xia Wei said again. This time, Brother Chu's purpose is to buy primordial essence. Hearing Xia Ziwei's words, Shopkeeper Hua's face showed a trace of embarrassment. "Shopkeeper Hua, what's wrong? Has Donghua Tower sold out of primordial essence?" Xia Ziwei felt a little embarrassed and hurriedly asked. "It hasn't been sold out." Shopkeeper Hua pondered for a moment and then said, "According to the rules, primordial essence is on the 5th floor. Only mid-level or above sword of Gojosian can enter and buy it. If a low-level sword of Gojosian wants to go to the 5th floor, he has to accept a challenge. However, it is reasonable to say that we have to give face to you, young Master Xia. It's just that things are different now. There have been some changes recently." "What changes?" Xia Ziwei's expression was a little ugly. On the way here, he had promised Chu Mu. Now that this kind of accident had happened, how could he be happy? If it were not for the fact that Donghua Tower could not afford to offend him, he would have flipped the table. Due to some reasons, the supply of primordial essence is not as good as before. Therefore, the rule is that only those with enough strength are qualified to buy it. Moreover, the amount of primordial essence purchased each time is also limited. No one can make an exception, even if clan leader Xia comes in person. I can't break the rules of Donghua Tower, shopkeeper Hua said awkwardly. At this point, even if Xia Ziwei was unhappy, he could not say anything. In fact, the most important thing was that he felt embarrassed. In that case, I accept the challenge, Chu Mu said unhurriedly. Brother Chu, this challenge is not easy. Xia Ziwei was just about to persuade Chu Mu. Brother Chu, you are a dragon among men. You might be able to pass the challenge. Shopkeeper Hua's eyes suddenly lit up. He said, Brother Chu, Brother Xia, and young Master Xia, please follow me. I will make the arrangements now. Let's go, Brother Xia. If I fail the challenge, I will trouble you again, Chu Mu said. Xia Ziwei had no choice but to agree. He followed shopkeeper Hua upstairs, one floor after another. The three of them came to the fourth floor. There were not many people on the fourth floor, excluding Chu Mu and the other two. There were two low-level sort of Gojosian. They looked quite young. The aura fluctuations on their bodies let Chu Mu know that their cultivation was in the third sky of creation realm. When one of them saw Xia Ziwei, his eyes lit up. He slowly stood up and walked towards Xia Ziwei with a faint smile on his face. Xia Ziwei was stunned when he saw the other party. Then anger flashed in his eyes. Chu Mu noticed the subtle changes in their expressions. He realized that there must be some conflict between Xia Ziwei and this person. Xia Ziwei, I thought you were dead. I didn't expect you to live so long. As soon as the other party said this, Chu Mu confirmed his thoughts. Chapter 1047. Lu Feiyun, you are still alive and well. How can I die? You should die first. Xia Ziwei retorted bluntly. I haven't seen you for a while, but your mouth is still so stinky. Xia, do you want to die? Lu Feiyun was angry, and his killing intent was sharp. Young Master Xia, young Master Lu, if you two have any grudges, please settle it outside, shopkeeper Hua said decisively. This was Donghua Tower, not a place for conflict. Xia, I will let you go this time. Lu Feiyun snorted and glanced at Xia Ziwei fiercely. He looked at Chu Mu with a contemptuous smile and said, Two-star sort of Gojosian, Xia, your taste in making friends has not improved. Instead, it has decreased. I was wrong to treat you as my opponent. As he spoke, he clicked his tongue and sighed. It was as if he regretted taking Xia Ziwei as an opponent. It is not up to you to judge my taste in making friends. Xia Ziwei calmed down and glanced at the other Samsung sort of Gojosian, but he did not attack like Lu Feiyun. Instead, he looked at shopkeeper Hua and asked, Shopkeeper Hua, when will Brother Chu's challenge be held? Please wait for a moment. I will arrange it now, shopkeeper Hua said with a smile, cupping his hands and turning to leave. Challenge? Xia, you are a friend of the two-star sort of Gojosian. Don't tell me you want to challenge the fifth floor as well. Lu Feiyun's eyes widened as if he had seen something bizarre. He looked at Chu Mu from head to toe and said, Tiske, Brother Zhu, this two-star sort of Gojosian's cultivation is not very good, but his courage is not bad. He is indeed courageous. The three-star sword king, who had been sitting on the chair the entire time and had traces of arrogance between his brows, absent-mindedly spoke. Yet he only glanced at Chu Mu. His gaze was as if he didn't place Chu Mu in his eyes at all. It didn't feel good to be looked down upon, but Chu Mu didn't seem to hear it and ignored it. In this world, there were many talented people, and there were also many arrogant people. If they encountered any arrogant people who looked down on them, they would be angry and refuted. Wouldn't that add a lot of trouble? Xia Ziwei glanced at Chu Mu and found that Chu Mu was indeed very calm. So he asked with a smile, May I know who this Brother Zhu is? Brother Zhu is the disciple of the second new king of the Azure Dragon Palace, the #1 sect in the Great Eastern Dragon region. Lu Feiyun said proudly. In the immemorial world, there were 4 human territories: East Dragon, West Tiger, South Sparrow, and North Marshall. Among them, the East Dragon territory was the strongest. Although it was not as big as the Great Chaos territory, it was only slightly weaker. The West Tiger region had 5 major forces, while the East Dragon region was dominated by one, which was the Azure Dragon Palace. 1 palace, 2 sects, and 3 religions. The Azure Dragon Palace was the palace, the most powerful force in the East Dragon region. The disciples of the Azure Dragon Palace were also divided into ranks. The disciples of the Sword of Gojoseon were called King Disciples. The so-called New King Disciples referred to the newly promoted King Disciples. Usually it referred to the low-level Sword of Gojoseon, which was 1 to 3 stars Sword of Gojoseon. As the number 1 sect in the Great Eastern Dragon region, the Azure Dragon Palace had more disciples than the Flying Heaven Pavilion. The number of king disciples in the palace was at least 10 times, or even dozens of times, more than the Flying Heaven Pavilion. There were at least a few thousand low-level Sword of Gojoseon. To be able to stand out among the thousands of low-level Sword of Gojoseon and become the second person, not only was he talented, but he also had extraordinary strength and exquisite combat skills. In short, this Zhu guy couldn't be underestimated. Therefore, when Xia Ziwei heard this, he was very surprised. The Great Chaos territory was indeed stronger than the Great Eastern Dragon region, but that was only in terms of overall strength. In terms of individual strength, the Azure Dragon Palace was only weaker than the True Dragon Dynasty in the Great Chaos territory. However, it was not inferior to the other human forces in the Great Chaos territory. It was also not something that the Xia clan and the Lu clan, which could only be considered small clans in the Great Chaos territory, could compare with. Brother Chu, why don't you come with me to the clan first? Let me take care of the liquefied elemental essence. How about it? Xia Ziwei transmitted his voice to Chu Mu. Brother Xia, what do you mean? Chu Mu also transmitted his voice to him. Brother Chu, you still don't know the rules of Donghua Tower's challenge. Donghua Tower only arranges one challenge, which is to send a 4-star Sword of Gojoseon. If more than one swordsman challenges, the challengers will first determine the winner, and the winner will challenge the 4-star Sword of Gojoseon sent by Donghua Tower. As long as he can fight against the 4-star Sword of Gojoseon and not lose, he will pass the challenge, Xia Ziwei explained quickly. Chu Mu instantly realized the worry in Xia Ziwei's heart. This Zhu guy was the second disciple of the new king of the Azure Dragon Palace, the number 1 sect in the Great Eastern Dragon region. He was very strong, and his cultivation was 1 level higher than Chu Mu's. Xia Ziwei was worried that Chu Mu would be defeated by the Zhu guy. Based on the current situation, once Chu Mu was defeated, Lu Feiyun would definitely make all kinds of sarcastic remarks. Don't worry, Brother Xia. Chu Mu smiled slightly. This Zhu guy might be powerful, but Chu Mu didn't think that he could defeat him. The only thing that interested him was the 4-star Sword of Gojoseon that Donghua Tower had arranged. Xia Ziwei, are you worried that your friend will be defeated by Brother Zhu's sword? Lu Feiyun could tell from Xia Ziwei's expression that something was amiss. He couldn't help but mock him. I will show mercy, the Sword of Gojoseon said calmly. Since Brother Chu has made a decision, then stay. Xia Ziwei was helpless. At worst, he would lose face with Yi Futian. Chu Mu, on the other hand, was unperturbed. Not long after, shopkeeper Hua appeared and invited the 4 of them to follow him to the challenge area. The challenge area was also on the 4th floor. The 4th floor was very large, and there was even a battle arena. The battle arena was also covered with seals that could withstand the attacks of the mid-tier Sword of Gojoseon. Both of you are challengers. According to the rules of this building, the 2 of you need to have a battle to determine the victor. After that, the victor will challenge this building's 4-star Sword King, shopkeeper Hua said with a beaming smile. The Sword of Gojoseon Zhu did make a move. His figure flashed, and he landed on the battle arena. 2-star sword of Gojosian, it's your turn, Lu Feiyun said mockingly. Chu Mu ignored him. He jumped and landed on the battle arena, facing the sword of Gojosian Zhu. If you admit defeat, my sword will definitely see blood. The sword of Gojosian Zhu opened his eyes and stared coldly at Chu Mu. His words reeked of blood, and a murderous aura gathered around him. Clearly, this sword of Gojosian Zhu's strength was pretty good. His combat strength wasn't something an ordinary sword of Gojosian could compare to. Chu Mu didn't say anything. In an instant, the sword of Gojosian Zhu moved. He shot out a sword light. It was incomparably sharp, and it cut open the space of the battle arena. It was like a meteor streaking across the sky. It was so bright and dazzling that people couldn't open their eyes. This sword of Gojosian Zhu integrated with the law of light. It was a sword skill of the sword of Gojosian Zhu named Aurora. So fast! Xia Ziwei was shocked. Such a sword light made his scalp tingle. That sword was like an aurora flashing by. It was extremely fast. An ordinary Samsung sword of Gojosian wouldn't be able to resist this sword. But the one facing this sword was Chu Mu, an extraordinary 2-star sword of Gojosian Zhu. Under everyone's gaze, Chu Mu made the impossible possible, but no one saw how he unsheathed his sword. In an instant, another sword light jumped out from the void. No one noticed it, and their eyes trembled. The speed of this sword light wasn't as fast as the aurora, but it strangely reached its target first. It was as if the aurora was a snake's weak point. It caused the aurora to tremble and dissipate. After shattering the aurora sword, Chu Mu's sword light was even more imposing. It pierced through the air like lightning and fiercer than thunder. The imposing aura spread out, causing Sword King Zhu's expression to greatly change. He hastily retracted his sword and retreated, waving it to block. However, Chu Mu's sword light was all-pervasive and unstoppable. It pierced through layers of defense and pierced the sword of Gojosian Zhu's chest, where his heart was. The tyrannical power instantly penetrated his inner armor and attacked his heart. He felt as if his heart was being pierced through and was about to be crushed. His face turned pale as he retreated. He groaned as blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Brother Zhu. Lu Feiyun's expression changed. Xia Ziwei was dumbfounded. Shopkeeper Hua's eyes flickered as he stared at Chu Mu as if he had discovered a rare treasure. You. The sword of Gojosian Zhu held his sword with one hand and covered his chest with the other. He staggered back a few steps as he stared at Chu Mu. It was as if he wanted to eat Chu Mu alive. You are not my opponent. Chu Mu calmly stated a fact. The sword of Gojosian Zhu knew that this was the truth, but he was unwilling to accept it. Waves of pain came from his heart as if it had been pierced through. He knew that his heart must have been injured and needed to be repaired. I will remember you, the sword of Gojosian Zhu said as he staggered down the stage. Lu Feiyun quickly supported him as they left. At this time, Lu Feiyun did not dare to mock Chu Mu anymore. Even the sword of Gojosian Zhu had been defeated in one strike. Lu Feiyun's strength was not as good as the sword of Gojosian Zhu. If he continued to provoke Chu Mu, it would be tantamount to provoking a tiger's whiskers. Brother Chu is indeed worthy of being the #1 fortune disciple in the West Tiger Territory. Such strength is really... Shopkeeper Hua cupped his hands and said, the sword of Gojosian Zhu was a Samsung sword of Gojosian. However, even an ordinary Samsung sword of Gojosian Zhu was no match for the Aurora sword of Gojosian. Moreover, that was not the full strength of the sword of Gojosian Zhu. Once he unleashed his full strength, he would be able to contend with a 4-star sword of Gojosian. Of course, Shopkeeper Hua felt that it was impossible for Zhu Yao to tie with a 4-star sword of Gojosian. However, Chu Mu had easily defeated the sword of Gojosian Zhu with one strike. Perhaps if he used his full strength, he might have a chance to pass the challenge of Donghua Tower. It was not impossible for the top geniuses among the sword of Gojoseon Zhu Yao to challenge someone who was 1 star higher than them. However, there were not many of them. For example, Chu Mu was only a 2-star sword of Gojoseon Zhu Yao. If he could pass the challenge, he would be the top of the top geniuses. Making friends with geniuses had always been the purpose of Donghua Tower. If allowed, shopkeeper Hua even wanted to exempt Chu Mu from the challenge, regardless of whether he had the strength to contend with the 4-star sword of Gojoseon. Unfortunately, although he was the shopkeeper, he was not the real owner of Donghua Tower. He could only do things according to the rules. Chapter 1048. Brother Chu, since the establishment of Donghua Tower, there have not been many low-level sword of Gojoseon who have been able to pass the challenge and enter the 5th floor. Shopkeeper Hua explained to Chu Mu, and the low-level sword of Gojoseon who can pass the challenge and enter the 5th floor will receive better treatment. Better treatment? Chu Mu was curious. Was there any difference after entering the 5th floor? Of course. The low-level sword of Gojoseon who can pass the challenge and enter the 5th floor have extraordinary talent. They are true geniuses, so they will naturally receive better treatment. Shopkeeper Hua spoke of an eternal truth. True geniuses would naturally receive better treatment, no matter where they went. Using the 5th floor as an example, the treatment can be divided into several levels. Shopkeeper Hua saw that Chu Mu was interested, so he explained, when a mid-level sword of Gojoseon enters the 5th floor, they will receive treatment from level 1 to level 3. When a high-level sword of Gojoseon enters the 5th floor, they will receive treatment from level 4 to level 6. When a Samsung sword of Gojoseon fights to a draw with a 4-star sword of Gojoseon, they will receive treatment from level 2. If they defeat a 4-star sword of Gojoseon, they will receive treatment from level 3, which is the same as a 6-star sword of Gojoseon. What is the difference between the treatment levels? Xia Ziwei asked curiously. He knew the rules of Donghua Tower, but he didn't know about the so-called treatment levels after entering the 5th floor. The level of treatment is related to many things. Take the amount of primordial essence that Brother Chu needs to purchase as an example. Shopkeeper Hua smiled proudly and said, "You should know that primordial essence is extracted from top-grade essence crystals and is very precious. Most of it is monopolized and rarely flows to the outside world. Although Donghua Tower sells primordial essence, we can't supply it endlessly. Therefore, we limit the amount that each sword of Gojoseon can purchase. The level of treatment is directly related to the quantity of liquefied elemental essence purchased. Donghua Tower has a limited supply of primordial liquid, but there are many sword of Gojoseon who need primordial liquid. Therefore, under normal circumstances, every sword of Gojoseon will only have 6 opportunities to purchase primordial liquid from Donghua Tower in their lifetime, from level 1 to level 6. This caused Chu Mu to feel astonished. Such a restriction was truly too obvious. First level treatment, you can only purchase 50 kilograms of liquefied essence. Second level treatment, 200 kilograms. Third level treatment, for 100 kilograms. Fourth level treatment, 800 kilograms. Fifth level treatment, 1,600 kilograms. Sixth level treatment, 3,200 kilograms. Of course, some sword of Gojoseon will be bought multiple times. Shopkeeper Hua only briefly mentioned this. If a Samsung sword of Gojoseon defeats a 4-star sword of Gojoseon and passes the challenge, he will enjoy the 3rd level treatment and can directly purchase 400 kilograms of primordial liquid. If nothing unexpected happens, 400 kilograms of primordial liquid is enough for a 3rd heavenly layer of creation to break through to the 4th heavenly layer of creation. There will still be a lot left. I see. It seems that this time Brother Chu's cultivation can break through from the 2nd heavenly layer of creation to the 3rd heavenly layer of creation. Xia Ziwei's eyes lit up. Once he breaks through, Brother Chu can challenge again and purchase primordial liquid. At that time, he will be able to use the power of the primordial liquid to raise his cultivation to the peak of the third heavenly layer. After some comprehension, he will definitely be able to break through to the fourth heavenly layer of creation in a short time. A swordsman's breakthrough required not only cultivation, but also realm. However, realms were not a natural barrier for true geniuses. Xia Ziwei believed that Chu Mu was a top genius and would definitely be able to comprehend the art of creation in a short time and raise his realm. Therefore, as long as he obtained enough primordial liquid, he would definitely be able to raise his cultivation rapidly in a few short years, and even reach the fourth heavenly layer of creation would not be a problem. A few years did not sound short at first, but for a sword of Gojosian, a few years was not a long time. Sometimes he would not even be able to break through a small level. Young Master Xia's words are very true. However, if Brother Chu can fight a 4-star sword of Gojosian to a draw with a 2-star sword of Gojosian, then the treatment will naturally be different, shopkeeper Hua said with a smile. He glanced at Chu Mu and Xia Ziwei and continued, under normal circumstances, a 2-star sword of Gojosian is far inferior to a Samsung sword of Gojosian, much less a 4-star sword of Gojosian. Therefore, if a 2-star sword of Gojosian can fight a 4-star sword of Gojosian to a draw and pass the test, then he will directly jump and enjoy the treatment of the 4th level. If he can defeat a 4-star sword of Gojosian, then he will enjoy the treatment of the 6th level, which is the treatment of a 9-star sword of Gojosian. 6th level treatment. Shopkeeper Huan narrowed his eyes and said, "That's right, the treatment of the 6th level. You can buy 3,200 caddies of Yuanlu. Even if you don't buy it all at once, you can keep it and buy it again when you have enough Yuanlu." At this time, the 4-star sword of Gojosian, arranged by Donghua Tower, had already arrived at the battle arena. I believe Shopkeeper Hua has already explained the rules of the challenge to you clearly. This 4-star sword of Gojosian was a very ordinary-looking, middle-aged man. He was the kind of man who would be difficult to recognize if thrown into a crowd. However, his aura was very vigorous, and his cultivation was very solid. Once the sword is drawn, except for the secret technique, I will use all my strength and will not show any mercy. If you feel that you are no match for me, you can admit defeat. Please. This was Chu Mu's reply. The 4-star sword of Gojosian's reply to Chu Mu was to draw his sword. An ear-piercing sound rang out, and a flash of sharp sword light appeared. It was strong and hard, as if it could cut through a mountain. The terrifying aura crushed down, and Chu Mu's expression turned serious. The sword strike that came down was not fast at all, but it was vigorous and majestic. It was upright and had the strength to cut through a mountain. It showed that the 4-star sword of Gojosian's swordsmanship and sword techniques focused on righteousness. As the sword struck out, the air in the entire battle arena froze. It bombarded Chu Mu, as if it wanted to suppress him. Such a sword strike directly triggered the vigorous aura, showing that the 4-star sword of Gojosian's basic swordsmanship and sword techniques were very solid. Perhaps he was not a genius, but he was a very diligent person. He worked steadily, and one step at a time, he forged his incomparably solid foundation. Facing this sword strike, Chu Mu seemed to see a mountain falling from the sky. With a thought, the divine wilderness sword essence rushed out of his dantian. The incomparably tyrannical divine wilderness sword essence roared and charged through his meridians like an endless river. The incomparably tyrannical power instantly filled Chu Mu's entire body. A terrifying aura gushed out from his body and immediately repelled the air that was crushing his body. Under the collision, there was a loud, rumbling sound, as if there were 10,000 horses galloping. The golden divine wilderness sword essence suddenly appeared and entered the lower grade saint sword in his hand, releasing a golden luster that was extremely resplendent. With a light stroke, the power of the earthquake was activated. In the high-frequency vibration, Chu Mu's sword seemed to have cut open the space of the battle arena, leaving behind a faint golden scar that did not dissipate for a long time. The majestic aura created by the 4-star sword of Gojoseon's sword was cut open by Chu Mu's sword. Chu Mu's speed was extremely fast. He ignored the suppression of the majestic aura and once again struck out with his sword. Immediately, the 4-star sword of Gojoseon's sword was repelled. The terrifying vibration power caused the 4-star sword of Gojoseon's sword to almost fly out of his hand. In terms of the strength of his body, the 4-star sword of Gojoseon was far inferior to Chu Mu. His expression changed greatly and his palm went numb. In that instant, he was unable to exert any strength. Chu Mu's sword once again slashed out. The 4-star sword of Gojoseon immediately used his movement technique to dodge. His movement technique was also so strong and direct. When he advanced and retreated, he was like a well-trained army, advancing and retreating according to the rules, strong and strong. Moreover, when he retreated, he also dispelled the numbness in his palm. Once again, he thrust his sword forward. The momentum was earth-shattering, and rumbling sounds could be heard. Chu Mu saw through all of his opponent's changes. Once again, he lifted his opponent's sword and thrust it forward. It had to be said that the 4-star sword of Gojoseon's strength was indeed stronger than the sword of Gojoseon from before. He was able to contend with Chu Mu for a while. Of course, this was also because Chu Mu did not use his full strength. After 10 moves, Chu Mu's sword landed on the 4-star sword of Gojoseon's back, shattering his protective sword aura. The tyrannical power shattered his robe and penetrated his inner armor, causing the 4-star sword of Gojoseon's expression to change. With a muffled groan, he staggered a few steps back. Before he could turn around, Chu Mu's sword had already landed on his neck. He won. Xia Ziwei and shopkeeper Hua's eyes suddenly widened. They were filled with disbelief, and their jaws dropped to the ground. They originally thought that Chu Mu was able to barely withstand the 4-star sword of Gojoseon's attack. In the end, he was at a slight disadvantage and was able to fight to a draw. This was already very good. In fact, shopkeeper Hua also had the idea that once Chu Mu was able to fight 100 moves with the 4-star sword of Gojoseon without losing, he would stop the fight and directly let Chu Mu pass the challenge. This was understandable, but he never expected that Chu Mu would actually defeat the 4-star sword of Gojoseon. Moreover, it was in the 10th move. Although he could see that the 4-star sword of Gojoseon did not display his full strength, it was not that he did not want to display his full strength. It was just that after the first move, he was defeated by Chu Mu's counterattack. He could only continuously dodge and block, and could not find a way to counterattack. In simple words, the 4-star sword of Gojoseon only took the initiative to attack once. After that, he was completely suppressed by Chu Mu. He was only defeated by Chu Mu after 10 moves. A 2-star sword of Gojoseon defeated a 4-star sword of Gojoseon in 10 moves. If this was spread out, how unbelievable would it be? Even the crown prince Long Zun of the true Dragon Dynasty would not be able to do this. Shopkeeper Hua murmured in a low voice. He was still extremely shocked, and thoughts were surging in his mind. He is too strong. Xia Ziwei's face was full of shock. When he was in the True Essence Great Hall, he saw with his own eyes that Chu Mu had killed the intermediate sword of Gojoseon. However, that was when the intermediate sword of Gojoseon's cultivation was suppressed. He was stronger than the Samsung sword of Gojoseon, but not as strong as before. Now, the 4-star sword of Gojoseon of the Donghua Tower was not suppressed at all. His aura was vigorous. Obviously, he had reached the late stage, or even the peak of the 4-star sword of Gojoseon. He did not underestimate Chu Mu, but he was still defeated by Chu Mu in 10 moves. What did this mean? It meant that Chu Mu's talent was too shocking. It meant that his strength was far beyond his cultivation. The 4-star sword of Gojoseon, who was defeated by Chu Mu, was also shocked. It took him a while to recover. He saluted Chu Mu with his sword and turned around to jump off the battle arena. Looking at his back, he seemed a little sad. He had cultivated hard for more than 100 years and had a solid foundation. However, he was defeated by a 2-star sword of Gojosian in 10 moves. It was a big blow. Chapter 1049. Brother Chu, please come with me. Shopkeeper Hua's attitude was even more enthusiastic than before. He couldn't help it. After all, Chu Mu's talent was so incredible. As for Xia Ziwei, he couldn't help it. After all, he was only a Samsung sort of Gojosian and wasn't qualified to step onto the 5th floor. He could only wait for Chu Mu on the 4th floor. In fact, if Chu Mu had asked, Shopkeeper Hua might have given him face and let him know that Xia Ziwei didn't want to buy Liyuan essence. However, since Xia Ziwei didn't ask, Chu Mu wouldn't owe him a favor for such a small matter. Chu Mu and Shopkeeper Hua entered the 5th floor. The difference between the 5th floor and the 4th floor of Donghua Tower was obvious. In terms of decoration, it was very simple, but it gave people a feeling that it was just right. All the decorations on the 5th floor had the effect of bringing life to all the decorations on the 5th floor. They were full of vitality, and the qi of heaven and earth here was very rich. It also exuded a unique fragrance that calmed people's hearts and minds. On the 5th floor, there was a person who was silent. It was as if he had merged with everything on the 5th floor. Lord Jiang, Brother Chu has passed the test, Shopkeeper Hua said respectfully as he bowed to the person. The person turned around. He had a rather ordinary face, but it gave people a very unique feeling. It was as if it was hard to forget after one glance. Chu Mu knew from this person's aura that he was a mid-level sword of Gojosian. As for how many stars the sword of Gojosian was, he couldn't tell. A mid-level sword of Gojosian was indeed qualified to be the lord of the 5th floor of Donghua Tower. When his gaze fell on Chu Mu, he was immediately surprised. He was surprised that Chu Mu was only a 2-star sword of Gojosian, but he had passed the test. Did he really pass the test? Lord Jiang asked, as if to confirm. Yes, not only did he pass the test, he even defeated his opponent in 10 moves. Shopkeeper Hua's tone carried a bit of pride, as if the person who defeated the 4-star sword of Gojosian in 10 moves was him. Defeat him in 10 moves. Pavilion Master Zhang's voice became sharp. His eyes were wide open and filled with disbelief. A 2-star sword of Gojosian defeated a 4-star sword of Gojosian in 10 moves. Was this a hallucination? Suddenly, Pavilion Master Zhang's expression changed. He seemed to have thought of something and gradually calmed down. Little friend, with the strength of a 2-star sword of Gojosian, you've defeated a 4-star sword of Gojosian. You will receive the highest treatment in this building. You can purchase 3,200 caddies of liquefied origin essence. Pavilion Master Jiang immediately said, however, we only have 500 caddies of liquefied origin essence now. The next batch will be delivered in half a year. Little friend, do you want to wait for half a year to buy? Or do you want to buy 500 caddies now? In fact, Chu Mu only had a little more than 1,000 top-grade origin crystals. If he calculated that 50 caddies of liquefied origin essence would cost 1,200,000 top-grade origin crystals, the number of origin crystals he had was not enough to buy 500 caddies. At most, he could buy 900 caddies. However, Chu Mu was very clear about how much liquefied origin essence he needed to break through to the 3rd heavenly layer of creation. That amount made him feel powerless. In terms of cultivation level, it was not a problem for Chu Mu at all. As long as he had enough energy, his cultivation could continuously break through to the 9-star sword of Gojosian. For him, cultivation level did not have any restrictions on him. The biggest restrictions were his cultivation level and cultivation talent. It was too difficult to increase his cultivation talent, and it was also incomparably difficult to increase his cultivation level. Before the transformation of his dantian, He needed to refine roughly 15 caddies of liquefied origin essence to raise his cultivation level to the peak of the second heavenly layer, and then another 15 caddies to break through to the early third heavenly layer. That was a total of 60 caddies. Now that his dantian had expanded tenfold, the capacity of his sword essence had also increased tenfold. Furthermore, the infinite desolation sword essence had transformed into divine desolation sword essence, and its quality had increased tenfold. This meant that the amount of liquefied origin essence Chumu needed had increased by 100-fold. In other words, Chumu now needed 6,000 caddies of liquefied origin essence to break through to the third heavenly layer of creation. This amount was almost equivalent to what the other sword of Gojosian needed to advance from the first heavenly layer of creation to the peak of the fourth heavenly layer of creation. Just as Chumu was about to answer, someone beat him to it. "I'll take 500 caddies of liquefied origin essence." A loud and clear voice rang out. Immediately after, a figure appeared on the 5th floor. Chumu and the other two took a look. This person was not very fat, but his face was disproportionate to his body. His face was full of fat, and he also had a pair of protruding ears. It was as strange as it could get. The aura of this fat pig face with protruding ears told Chumu that he was another mid-level sword of Gojosian, and he did not seem to be a 4-star sword of Gojosian. Indeed, one could not judge a book by its cover. He clasped his hands behind his back, and his small eyes shone brightly. He strode towards Landlord Jiang and said in a loud and clear voice, "I'll take 500 caddies of liquefied origin essence." "Sir, you are a 5-star sword of Gojosian. According to the rules of this floor, you enjoy second-level treatment and can only purchase 200 caddies of liquefied origin essence." Landlord Jiang said unhurriedly, "Besides, everything has a first-come, first-served basis. Young friend, Chu needs to purchase first." 2-star sword of Gojosian? At this time, the protruding sword of Gojosian finally noticed Chumu. His small eyes fell on Chumu, and he was immediately surprised. "It seems that you have some background. However, no matter who you are, I'll take 500 caddies of liquefied origin essence." This attitude made Landlord Jiang and Shopkeeper Hua frown. Chumu's expression did not change. There were all kinds of people in this world. There was nothing strange about it. Chumu ignored the protruding sword of Gojosian, and instead looked at Landlord Jiang and asked, "How much is 500 caddies of liquefied origin essence worth?" "The business of our Donghua Tower has always been very fair. 50 caddies of liquefied origin essence are 2 million supreme-grade origin crystals. 500 caddies of liquefied origin essence are naturally 12 million supreme-grade origin crystals," Landlord Jiang said with a smile. "Then may I ask if I use upper-grade origin crystals to purchase it?" Chumu asked. "Upper-grade origin crystals?" Landlord Jiang muttered to himself. The protruding sword of Gojosian sneered, and his voice was loud and sharp. "What a joke! If you don't have supreme-grade origin crystals, then get lost. You want to buy liquefied origin essence with mere upper-grade origin crystals? It's not that upper-grade origin crystals are impossible. However, young friend, you should know that in theory, 100 upper-grade origin crystals are equivalent to 1 supreme-grade origin crystal. In reality, however, the exchange ratio between the two is 120 upper-grade origin crystals for 1 supreme-grade origin crystal. If you use it to purchase liquefied origin essence, then this ratio must be raised again. Therefore, the price for 50 caddies of liquefied origin essence is 150 million upper-grade origin crystals," Landlord Jiang said to Chumu. "I'll use supreme-grade origin crystals to purchase 900 caddies of liquefied origin essence, and I'll use upper-grade origin crystals to purchase 100 caddies," Chumu said without hesitation. Instantly, Landlord Jiang, Shopkeeper Hua, and the protruding sword of Gojosian were all greatly shocked. A 2-star sword of Gojosian actually had more than 10 million supreme-grade origin crystals and more than 100 million upper-grade origin crystals. Such wealth was even richer than many high-level sword of Gojosian. A trace of greed flashed through the protruding sword of Gojosian's beady eyes. All right. Landlord Jiang regained his composure once again. As a landlord, his temperament was clearly not something that an ordinary sword of Gojosian could compare to. Wait! The protruding sword of Gojosian immediately roared. I've already said that I'll take this 500 caddies of liquefied origin essence. Could it be that you want to forcefully break the rules of Donghua Tower? Hearing this, Landlord Jiang's face immediately darkened. This protruding sword of Gojosian had repeatedly angered him. Of course not. How could I have the guts to break the rules of Donghua Tower? On the contrary, I'm following the rules of Donghua Tower. The protruding sword of Gojosian was not afraid at all. Instead, he said proudly, Rules? Humph. The rules of Donghua Tower are about first come, first served. Could it be that you want to put the cart before the horse? Landlord Jiang was even more annoyed. How dare you say that your actions are following the rules of Donghua Tower? Could it be that you think I'm weak and easy to bully? A huge pressure of the sword appeared. Landlord Jiang's face was full of anger. His eyes were sharp as he stared at the protruding sword of Gojosian. He looked as if he would not let him off if he did not give a reasonable explanation. Wait. In the face of the angry Landlord Jiang, the protruding sword of Gojosian was not so calm. He hurriedly shouted. With a wave of his hand, something appeared in his palm. Look, what is this? Landlord Jiang's gaze shifted to the object in the protruding sword of Gojosian's hand. He frowned, and then his expression changed. The anger on his face receded like the tide. You, how could you have this? Landlord Jiang looked very shocked. Why I have this has nothing to do with you. The protruding sword of Gojosian smiled proudly. But as far as I know, anyone who has a true Dragon Golden Badge can enjoy the highest level of treatment in any property of the true Dragon Dynasty. No one can violate this rule. Landlord Jiang, could it be that you want to violate this rule? The object was completely black. There was a golden dragon carving on it. It was so lifelike that it looked as if it was about to come to life. The entire True Dragon Dynasty only gives out 100 True Dragon Golden Badges. Anyone who has a True Dragon Golden Badge will receive the highest level of treatment in any property of the True Dragon Dynasty. If there is any conflict, the owner of the True Dragon Golden Badge will be in charge. Not only did Landlord Jiang's anger disappear, but it was also replaced by bitterness. Unless you have a badge of a higher level than the True Dragon Golden Badge. He seemed to be talking to himself, but also seemed to be talking to Chu Mu. It was equivalent to giving Chu Mu an explanation. Rules were rules. The Donghua Tower had its own rules, but the True Dragon Dynasty had its own rules. The small rules had to be followed by the big rules because the Donghua Tower belonged to the True Dragon Dynasty. It was one of the many properties of the True Dragon Dynasty in the domain of chaos. Such an unforeseen event caused shopkeeper Hua's expression to change. Finally, he looked apologetically at Chu Mu. If he could make the decision, he wanted to throw this arrogant and protruding ear fatty out. Unfortunately, he couldn't do so, or else the consequences would be severe. Now, take out the 500 kilograms of liquefied yuanfu. The protruding sword of Gojosian smiled proudly. His small eyes were almost invisible. With a flip of his hand, the True Dragon Golden Badge in his hand disappeared. He put it away. Landlord Jiang had no choice but to turn around and take out the 500 kilograms of liquefied yuanfu. Chapter 1050. Wait. A voice rang out from Chu Mu's mouth. Young friend, do you have any other questions? Lord Jiang stopped and turned to look at Chu Mu. Why don't you go and get the liquefied elemental essence? I'm in a hurry, the wind-eared Sword King urged. Pavilion Lord Jiang ignored him. That's right, he had to follow the rules. But that didn't mean that he would allow the other party to order him around. My question is, what's above the true dragon golden token? Chu Mu asked. Let me tell you. Above the true dragon golden token is the true dragon crown prince token. And above the true dragon crown prince token is the true dragon supreme emperor token. Without waiting for Jiang Landlord to speak, the wind-eared Sword King spoke first. Looking at Chu Mu, his small eyes were full of disdain. Looks like the faction behind you isn't much. You don't even know this. Chu Mu acted as if he didn't hear him. He wasn't from the great chaotic territory, so it was normal that he didn't know. Brother Chu, the true dragon crown prince token is the sword token of the crown prince of the true dragon dynasty. It is said that there are only 9 of them. Chu Mu heard shopkeeper Hua's voice. The true dragon supreme emperor token is the sword token of the emperor of the true dragon dynasty. It is said that there are only 3 of them. Is the crown prince of the true dragon dynasty Longzun? Chu Mu asked again. When the wind-eared Sword King heard this, his expression of disdain became even more obvious. He felt that Chu Mu must have popped out from some unknown corner and was extremely unsophisticated. Yes, Crown Prince Longzun, Lord Jiang, and shopkeeper Hua showed respect from the bottom of their hearts. I obtained something in the past. Now, Lord Jiang, please appraise it, Chu Mu said indifferently. He raised his left hand and a golden light shot toward Lord Jiang. Pavilion Master Jiang grabbed at the air and used his sword origin to grab the golden object. He fixed it in the air above his palm and examined it carefully. Ha 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 ha, it's just a piece of scrap metal. Do you think it's the true dragon crown prince decree? The sword of Gojoseon laughed out loud with an ear-piercing voice, causing shopkeeper Hua to frown. However, Landlord Jiang and Chu Mu acted as if they didn't hear him. Their loud laughter turned into dry laughter. This. Pavilion Master Jiang's eyes were trembling, and his entire body was trembling. An expression of disbelief appeared on his face, and he looked extremely shocked. The golden object was a small golden sword. There were only 2 words written on it, Crown Prince. The small golden sword exuded a unique aura. Its unique majesty could not be faked. After a while, Jiang Gongzhu finally managed to calm himself down. He wiped away the sweat on his forehead and respectfully returned the small golden sword to Chu Mu. He said, Sir Chu, 500 kilograms of liquid essence only costs 1,000 top-grade origin crystals. Please wait a moment, I will go get it. What did you say? Sword of Gojoseon was shocked and angry. Are you going to violate the rules of the true dragon dynasty? I'm doing this to comply with the rules of the true dragon dynasty. Open your pitiful little eyes and see what that is. Jiang Gongzhu seemed to be elated. He turned his head and shouted at Sword of Gojoseon. Having a good temperament did not mean that he would be bullied by others. Is that the true dragon crown prince token? Sword of Gojoseon's small eyes widened in disbelief. He immediately roared, Absolutely impossible. My golden true dragon token was personally given to Senior Brother Morong by the second prince of the true dragon dynasty. I'm here on Senior Brother Morong's orders to buy the liquid essence. Do you know who Senior Brother Morong is? He's the number 1 middle grade Sword of Gojoseon in our Azure Dragon Palace. He once killed a 7-star Sword of Gojoseon, a peerless genius. Even a peerless genius like Senior Brother Morong could only get a golden true dragon token. How could a mere 2-star Sword of Gojoseon get a true dragon crown prince token? It's definitely fake. Sword of Gojoseon's voice was a bit hysterical. His words revealed his background and why he was so arrogant. So, he was a disciple of the Azure Dragon Palace. So, his backer was the number 1 middle grade king grade disciple of the Azure Dragon Palace. He was indeed very powerful to be able to kill a 7-star sword of Gojosian with the strength of a 6-star sword of Gojosian. As a peerless genius, he was indeed qualified to get a golden true dragon token. However, Chu Mu defeated a 4-star sword of Gojosian with the strength of a 2-star sword of Gojosian in 10 moves. If it was a life and death battle, he would have killed his opponent already. Crossing 1-star level and crossing 2-star levels were two different concepts. If crossing 1-star level was qualified to get a golden true dragon token, then crossing 2-star levels to get a true dragon crown prince token. Why couldn't it? Of course, there were only 9 true dragon crown prince tokens. In order to get one, in addition to strength, one also had to be lucky. Sir, Donghua Tower does not welcome you. You can leave now, Lord Jiang said to the sword of Gojosian without hesitation, asking him to leave. You. The sword of Gojosian was furious and was about to be rude. Get lost. Lord Jiang's eyes widened in anger. His black hair flew, and a terrifying aura burst out. The entire Donghua Tower seemed to shake. The extremely powerful sword pressure fell on the sword of Gojosian, making his expression change drastically. Lord Jiang was a 6-star sword of Gojosian, and he was one of the more powerful ones. The sword of Gojosian was just an ordinary 5-star sword of Gojosian. His dissatisfaction was shattered. The sword of Gojosian's expression changed drastically. He retreated quickly and quickly turned to go downstairs. He knew that if he continued, he would only be humiliating himself. I will report what happened today to Senior Brother Moron. The sword of Gojosian thought to himself as he left. He hated Chu Mu to the core. Lord Jiang's powerful aura was restrained. He smiled and turned to get the Yuanlu. 500 kilograms of Yuanlu were stored in 10 white jade bottles. Each bottle was 50 kilograms. With the True Dragon Crown Prince token, he could get a discount. So, Chu Mu only needed to pay 10 million top-grade Yuanlu. Chu Mu didn't refuse to make the best use of everything. With 10 million top-quality origin crystals gone, more than half of his wealth was gone. However, Chu Mu didn't feel it was a pity at all. He had accumulated these things for his own cultivation in the first place. If he didn't use them, it would just be a waste. 500 kilograms of Yuanlu was still not enough for Chu Mu to break through. However, Donghua Tower didn't have any more Yuanlu. Of course, even if they did, Chu Mu couldn't afford it. He only had a few 100,000 top-grade Yuanlu left. The regret that flashed through Chu Mu's eyes was seen by Lord Jiang. Do you need more Yuanlu? Lord Jiang asked tentatively. To be honest, I do need more Yuanlu. However, Donghua Tower doesn't have any, and I don't have many top-grade Yuanlu left, Chu Mu answered casually. For your situation, I do have a suggestion. It's very suitable for you. Lord Jiang thought for a moment, and his eyes lit up. Please speak. Chu Mu was also somewhat curious. The rising dragon meet of the true dragon dynasty, which is held once every 100 years, is about to begin. Lord Jiang explained excitedly. The rising dragon meet is divided into 3 stages. The first stage is for the low-level sword of Gojosian. The second stage is for the mid-level sword of Gojosian. The third stage is for the high-level sword of Gojosian. The 3 stages will be held at the same time until a champion emerges from each stage. What are the benefits of being the champion? Chu Mu asked. The true dragon dynasty wouldn't hold such a meet for no reason. Of course there are benefits, and they are great benefits, Lord Jiang said with some yearning in his voice. There was a hint of yearning in his voice as he continued. As long as you become the champion of each stage, you will be able to obtain an excellent reward. This time, the reward has already been announced in advance. It is to enter the Long Yuan pool to cultivate. Before Chu Mu could ask, Lord Jiang started to explain. The Long Yuan Pond is said to be a sacred place for cultivation in the true dragon dynasty. The last time it was opened was 300 years ago. The Long Yuan Pond contains pure yuan energy that is tens or even hundreds of times more concentrated than the yuan liquid. It can be quickly absorbed to improve one's cultivation. This is only one of the benefits. The other is that the Long Yuan Pond contains a special force called the strength of the dragon. Cultivating in the Long Yuan Pond will not only allow you to absorb pure yuan energy, but also the strength of the dragon. The strength of the dragon can improve one's cultivation, but it can strengthen one's body. You should know that the strength of one's body is very important to a swordsman. Long Yuan Pond, yuan energy, strength of the dragon. Chu Mu's eyes lit up. Wasn't this what he needed the most? Not only could he absorb it to improve his cultivation, but he could also strengthen his body. It was killing two birds with one stone. How do I participate in the rising dragon meet? Chu Mu asked. There are two ways to participate in the rising dragon meet. The first is to go to the True Dragon Dynasty and register yourself. Lord Jiang said slowly. The second way is to go through Donghua Tower. It will be faster, but in this way, Master Chu will temporarily wear the symbol of Donghua Tower and fight as a swordsman of Donghua Tower. If you win, you will also enter the Long Yuan Pond. Donghua Tower will also be rewarded by the dynasty. But everything depends on Master Chu's decision, Lord Jiang said. To be honest, he hoped that Chu Mu could participate in the Rising Dragon meet as a swordsman of Donghua Tower. But Chu Mu's talent and status made it difficult for him to ask. In that case, Lord Jiang, please register for me, Chu Mu said after thinking for a while. Chu Mu felt that Lord Jiang was not bad. Moreover, it would be more troublesome for him to register himself. There was no harm in participating as a swordsman of Donghua Tower. Really? Lord Jiang was overjoyed. Really? Chu Mu nodded. Good. No matter what happens in the end, I will repay you for your kindness today, Lord Jiang said excitedly. Pavilion Master Jiang said excitedly. Soon after, he said to Shopkeeper Hua, Shopkeeper Hua, bring young Master Chu to rest first. After I register, I will bring young Master Chu out. Master Chu, please follow me. Shopkeeper Hua was now much more respectful to Chu Mu. There was no other way. Chu Mu had taken out the True Dragon Crown Prince token. No matter how he obtained it, it showed that he was extraordinary. Coupled with the fact that a 2-star sword of Gojosian defeated a 4-star sword of Gojosian, it was even more indescribable. Moreover, Chu Mu had agreed to participate in the Rising Dragon meet as a swordsman of Donghua Tower. With his strength, he might be able to win the championship. When the time came, he would also get a share of the rewards from Donghua Tower. Chapter 1051. A 10-meter-long green flying ship in the shape of a bamboo leaf rose into the sky outside Donghua City. It soared into the sky, riding the wind and breaking the waves. The green power of wind surrounded it as if it was carrying the flying ship. It tore through the sky and flew away quickly. This green flying ship was the Donghua flying ship of Donghua Tower. It was not equipped with any martial arts, but it was extremely fast and suitable for traveling. There were only 3 people on the green Donghua flying ship. They were Lord Jiang of Donghua Tower, a mid-level sword of Gojosian, and Chu Mu. The 5th floor of Donghua Tower was managed by Lord Jiang. He was a mid-level sword of Gojosian. The 6th floor, which was the highest, was managed by a high-level sword of Gojosian. Most of the time, the high-level sword of Gojosian was cultivating. Therefore, many things in Donghua Tower were managed by Lord Jiang, unless there was something he could not decide on. Lord Jiang's purpose this time was to take Chu Mu and his companion to the True Dragon Dynasty. Besides Chu Mu, the other mid-level sword of Gojosian was a 6-star sword of Gojosian. His name was Xieronghua. He was also the sword of Gojosian who was participating in the Rising Dragon League as a swordsman of Donghua Tower. Lord Jiang did not say why Xieronghua would participate in the Rising Dragon League as a swordsman of Donghua Tower, and Chu Mu was not interested in asking. As for Xie Ronghua, he did not pay any attention to Chu Mu. He did not even say a word. His eyes showed that he did not care about Chu Mu at all. As a result, they were able to coexist peacefully. The 10-meter-long flying ship was the smallest among all the flying ships, but it was more than enough to accommodate 3 people. Along the way, besides controlling the flying ship, Lord Jiang also chatted with Chu Mu and his companion. He was indeed a good person and did not neglect anyone. It would take a month to travel from Donghua Tower to the True Dragon Dynasty on this flying ship. The Rising Dragon League would start in half a month, and the registration period would end within a month. Chu Mu also felt lucky that he agreed to participate as a swordsman of Donghua Tower. Otherwise, it would be unknown whether he could make it to the True Dragon Dynasty in a month. Sitting on the Donghua flying ship, Chu Mu was not in a hurry. Sometimes he would chat with Landlord Jiang, and sometimes he would meditate on his swordsmanship. The days passed quickly. A month had passed. Chu Mu, who was sitting on Donghua's flying ship, could see a group of palaces in front of him. They were resplendent and majestic, covering an area of tens of thousands of miles. There seemed to be a golden aura rising above the palaces. It looked like a dragon circling around, protecting the True Dragon Dynasty. The majestic power of the True Dragon Dynasty stunned Chu Mu for a moment. Xie Ronghua glanced at Chu Mu with a hint of mockery in his eyes. The Donghua flying ship could not fly directly above the True Dragon Dynasty and land outside the True Dragon Dynasty. As a subsidiary property of the True Dragon Dynasty, the flying ship naturally had a special place to stay. In addition to the Donghua flying ship, there were other flying ships of different colors, symbols, and shapes. They came from various properties of the True Dragon Dynasty. Walking down from the flying ship, Chu Mu and Xie Ronghua went to the resting place under the guidance of Landlord Jiang. At this point, the registration for the Rising Dragon League had ended. The remaining half a month was for the sword of Gojoseon, who had signed up to rest and adjust themselves to their best condition before the competition. Every sword of Gojoseon had a resting place. It was very luxurious, and there were all kinds of exquisite snacks and precious fruits. It showed how amazing the talent and foundation of the True Dragon Dynasty was. These snacks and fruits could not be eaten outside. In addition, there were formations set up in the resting place that could absorb yuan qi, making the yuan qi in the resting place richer and more abundant. It was beneficial for cultivation. There was also a concentrating spirit incense. The fragrance was not easy to detect, but it had the effect of calming one's mind. If such a concentrating spirit incense was sold outside, it could be sold for thousands of top-grade yuan crystals. It was very valuable. One concentrating spirit incense could only burn for a day. After 15 days, it would be more than 10,000 top-grade yuan crystals. The True Dragon Dynasty had spent a lot for the Rising Dragon League. It should be known that the number of sword of Gojoseon who had signed up to participate was more than 1,000. For half a month, Chu Mu stayed in the resting place to cultivate. According to his usual cultivation allocation, he cultivated the Divine Wilderness Sword Essence, the Flying Heaven Sword Controlling Technique, Sword Arts, comprehending the power of laws, sword skills, and so on. Now that there was Yuan liquid, Chu Mu used it to cultivate. Previously, Chu Mu had obtained 5 kilograms of Yuan liquid. At that time, he could only consume 1 kilogram at a time. After refining it, he needed a period of time before he could consume it again. Now, Chu Mu's cultivation base had increased. Adding to the fact that he had refined the 9 revolution body-refining fruit, his body was more than 10 times stronger than before. His meridians and other meridians were also strengthened by at least 10 times. Moreover, his dantian had undergone a transformation, causing it to expand 10 times and become 10 times stronger. The changes were unimaginable. Therefore, Chu Mu could consume 5 kilograms of yuan liquid at a time. After refining it, he only needed a day to refine it again. In this way, Chu Mu could refine 70 to 80 kilograms of yuan liquid in half a month, causing his sword essence to become denser. Of course, this kind of improvement was too slow. Chu Mu had no other choice. He also hoped that it would be faster, but the reality was as such. He could only cultivate slowly and hope that Long Yuan Qi would not disappoint him. Half a month's time was actually very short. Sometimes it would pass just by a little bit of seclusion, as if it was just a breath of time. But sometimes many things could be done in half a month. When the sword of Gojoseon, who wanted to participate in the Rising Dragon League, had all arrived, all kinds of information began to circulate. There were people who specially dug up information and organized it into information. As a matter of fact, Jiang Landlord gave Chu Mu a book of information that had been carefully organized. The title of this book was very straightforward. It was called Champion Candidates. As the name implied, it was the candidate who had the potential to become the champion of this Rising Dragon League. Outside of cultivating, Chu Mu was also interested. He picked it up and flipped through it. Jiang Landlord sat to the side, eating exquisite snacks. This book was divided into 3 sections, corresponding to the 3 major stages of the Sword of Gojoseon. The first section recorded the low-level Sword of Gojoseon. Flipping to the first page, a name jumped into his eyes. Long Zun. Under Long Zun was a related introduction. The True Dragon Dynasty's 3rd prince, because of his outstanding true dragon bloodline, powerful soul, and cultivation talent, the True Dragon Emperor had designated him as the True Dragon Dynasty's crown prince, the only crown prince. 55 years old this year. Early 3rd, heavenly stage fortune, realm, cultivation. He had inherited the True Dragon Sword Dao, and his sword intent was at low-level divine rank. He had grasped the power law, fire law, yang law, and lightning law, all of which had reached low-level divine rank. He had grasped 3 earth rank, 1st grade heaven-shaking, Sword of Gojoseon sword skills, and 2 earth rank 2nd grade heaven-shaking sword skills. He was judged to be the most likely candidate to become the champion of the low-level Sword of Gojoseon Rising Dragon League. There were even people who believed that the champion of the low-level Sword of Gojoseon Rising Dragon League would be none other than the Long Zun Crown Prince. Early 3rd Heavenly Stage Fortune Realm, grasped 4 kinds of laws and 5 sword skills. Chu Mu was greatly astonished. The Long Zun Crown Prince was the person who had competed with him for the number 1 fortune disciple position. His sword intent and profoundness had both reached the early 9th Revolution realm. Chu Mu wasn't sure how high his cultivation talent was, but he guessed that it wouldn't be lower than 2nd grade. His comprehension was also not to be underestimated. It wasn't strange that he could reach the 3rd Heavenly Stage Fortune realm. After all, he was talented and had the True Dragon Dynasty as his backer. Even if he broke through to the 4th Heavenly Stage Fortune realm, Chu Mu wouldn't be surprised. What surprised Chu Mu was the number of laws and sword skills that Long Zun had grasped. In terms of comprehension, Chu Mu was confident that he was better than Long Zun, but he had only managed to transform 5 kinds of laws and grasp 4 or 5 sword skills after using the high-grade Sand of Time. In other words, other than the bloodline, the True Dragon Dynasty's foundation was also not to be underestimated. With such strength, it wasn't impossible to claim that he was the champion of the Rising Dragon League's low-level Sword of Gojoseon. Flipping to the 2nd page, another name jumped into view. Lan Haichao, the Starry Sky Sword Sex number 1 low-level monarch-ranked disciple, 64 years old this year. It was said that he had already grasped the essence of the Starry Sky Sword Dao, and his sword intent had transformed into an elemental sword intent. Starry Sky Sword Intent. Lan Haichao's cultivation was at the peak of the 3rd Heavenly Stage Fortune realm. His sword intent had reached the peak of the Heaven class, and he had grasped the laws of wind, speed, lightning, water, and stars. All of them had reached the peak of the Heaven class. He had also grasped 3 Earth class, first-grade Earth-class sword skills and 2 Earth-class, second-grade Earth-class sword skills. It was said that he had also grasped 1 Earth-class, third-grade Earth-class sword skill. Lan Haichao's information entered Chumu's eyes, and he remembered it clearly. Lan Haichao was indeed powerful and was a worthy opponent. The Starry Sky Sword Sect was second only to the true Dragon Dynasty among the human race in the chaotic territory. Although it wasn't as strong as the true Dragon Dynasty, the difference wasn't that great. As the number 1 low-level King Realm disciple, Lan Haichao wasn't to be underestimated. It should be known that the sword skills grasped by a peerless genius were different from those grasped by ordinary swordsmen. For example, the Samsung Sword of Gojoseon that Chumu had encountered in the past could even display a third-grade Sword of Gojoseon. However, the sword skills weren't perfect enough and the power wasn't strong enough. It couldn't be compared with the sword skills of a peerless genius. On the contrary, a peerless genius either didn't grasp any sword skills. If they did, it must be perfect and powerful. Otherwise, they might as well not have it. Flipping to the 3rd page, the 3rd name jumped into view. Morong Shao, the number 1 disciple of the New King Realm, disciple of the Azure Dragon Palace in the Eastern Dragon Territory. 65 years old. Cultivation at the peak of the 3rd sky of Creation Realm. He inherited the Azure Dragon Sword Principle. It was said that he had already comprehended the sword principle to a profound level, causing his sword intent to transform into the Azure Dragon's sword intent. It was at the top of the heaven level, and its power was even stronger. He had grasped the laws of wind, the laws of wood, the laws of water, the laws of Een, and the laws of beasts. He had also grasped 3 first-grade Earthbreaker sword skills and 2 second-grade Earthbreaker sword skills. It was said that he had also grasped 1 third-grade Earthbreaker sword skill. The rules of Yin and Yang were opposite rules. They were relatively rare rules. The rules of Beast was also a rare rule. Naturally, its power was stronger than ordinary rules. Flipping to the 4th page, the 4th name jumped into view. Chapter 1052. Crown Prince Longzhuan, Lan Haichao, Morong Shao, Li Xiaoxiao, and Wang Yu. These 5 were all at the 3rd heavenly layer of Creation Realm. Longzhuan was at the early stage, while the other 4 were a few years older than Longzhuan. They were all at the peak of the 3rd heavenly layer of Creation Realm. The 5 of them were considered the most likely candidates to win the championship. As for the intermediate Sword of Gojoseon and advanced Sword of Gojoseon, Chumu only skimmed through them. After all, he would not fight with them. Their information is still not comprehensive enough. Jiang Landlord smiled. Although young Master Chu's cultivation is only at the early stage of the 2nd heavenly layer of Creation Realm, you were able to defeat a 4-star Sword of Gojoseon in 10 moves. Many Samsung Sword of Gojoseon geniuses can't do that. It's not unreasonable for the 5 of them to be considered the most likely candidates to win the championship, Chumu said with a smile. Indeed, from the information, it could be seen that the 5 of them were not to be underestimated. They were powerful, and they must have mastered a secret technique to increase their strength. Once they used it, they would be even more powerful. In the end, information was just information. Every peerless genius had their own trump cards. They wouldn't use them easily, and they wouldn't let others know about them. Even so, Chumu was confident that he could compete with them and even defeat them all. Besides Chumu himself, no one else knew about his situation. His cultivation was at the 2nd heavenly layer of Creation Realm, but the quantity and quality of his sword energy was comparable to that of a 4th heavenly layer of Creation Realm. In terms of cultivation strength, Chumu was not inferior to Crown Prince Longzhuan and the others. On the contrary, he might even surpass them. Of course, Crown Prince Longzhuan and the others cultivated extraordinary techniques. The quantity and quality of their sword energy would definitely be higher than that of an ordinary Samsung, Sword of Gojoseon. However, Chumu believed that the 5 champions were not complete. Perhaps some of them had hidden their strength and were waiting for the final moment to explode. They would appear as dark horses and aim for the championship. Before leaving, Jiang Landlord also told Chumu not to feel too much pressure. He just had to fight with all his heart. Whether or not he could become the champion would be up to fate. In fact, although Jiang Landlord thought highly of Chumu, he didn't think that Chumu would be able to win the championship. After all, there were many powerful low-grade sword of Gojosian, and each of them could fight across star ranks. As for Chumu, he was only a 2-star sword of Gojosian, and his level was lower than theirs. Chumu smiled and didn't answer. He didn't need to answer because when the time came, Pavilion Master Jiang and the others would know who the champion was. After Lord Jiang left, Chumu flipped through the information once more. The corners of his mouth curled up into a smile as he thought to himself, "This championship is mine for sure. Everything that stands in my way will be crushed under my sword." Putting down the information, Chumu began to cultivate again. The name of the champion gradually spread out and became the topic of discussion. In the blink of an eye, half a month passed. The Rising Dragon pageant had officially begun. All the participating sword of Gojosian left their resting rooms and arrived at the venue. This was an open-air palace. There were countless seats all around, enough to seat hundreds of thousands of spectators. In the center, there was a huge platform that could hold tens of thousands of people. All the sword kings participating in the Rising Dragon Grand Assembly were gathered here. According to the 3 stages, they were divided into low-grade sword of Gojosian, mid-grade sword of Gojosian, and high-level sword of Gojosian. Chumu swept his gaze over the crowd. The low-grade sword of Gojosian had the most people, close to 2,000. The mid-grade sword of Gojosian had the second most people, close to 1,300. The high-level sword of Gojosian had the least, less than 600. Close to 4,000 sword of Gojosian had gathered here. Even if they did not do it deliberately, their bodies still emitted traces of sharpness that converged into one and filled the huge platform, shocking everyone. Is that Crown Prince Longzun? He is indeed a dragon among men. I see him. He has an imposing appearance and an extraordinary aura. As expected of the most talented crown prince in the history of the true dragon dynasty, I'm sure that the champion of the low-grade sword of Gojosian will definitely be Crown Prince Longzun. I don't think so. Crown Prince Longzun is indeed very powerful, but his cultivation base is not as good as the other 4. Moreover, his grasp of the sword Dao is not as profound as the other 4. He has not reached the stage of transforming his sword intent, so it's hard to say who will be the champion. In any case, I think that the champion of the low-grade sword of Gojosian will definitely be one of the 5. That's not necessarily true. What if a dark horse appears? Dark horse? Are you talking about the 2 sword of Gojosian, whose cultivation base is only at the 2nd heavenly layer of creation? In an instant, the spearhead was pointed at Chumu. However, among the nearly 2,000 low-grade sword of Gojosian, the most eye-catching ones were undoubtedly the 5 champions, as well as Chumu and another person. This was because other than Chumu and a very young-looking sword of Gojosian, the other sword of Gojosian's cultivation base were all at the 3rd heavenly layer of creation. Even the weakest was at the initial 3rd heavenly layer. Only Chumu and the young-looking sword of Gojosian's cultivation base were at the 2nd heavenly layer of creation. However, Chumu's cultivation base was at the initial 2nd heavenly layer of creation, while the young-looking sword of Gojosian's cultivation base was at the advanced 2nd heavenly layer of creation. Regardless of whether they were at the initial or advanced 2nd heavenly layer of creation, they could not be compared with those at the 3rd heavenly layer of creation. Therefore, Chumu and the sword of Gojosian, who seemed to be less than 20 years old, became the focus of discussion. The mid-grade sword of Gojosian's group consisted entirely of 6-star sword of Gojosian. However, the high-grade sword of Gojosian's group was different. Most of them were 8-star sword of Gojosian, with a few 9-star sword of Gojosian. At this moment, countless rays of light shot up into the sky in the distance, emitting sharp, whistling sounds. Balls of light shot up into the sky like fireworks. They soared into the sky and exploded 1,000 meters in the air. They scattered and were extremely dazzling, attracting the attention of countless people. In the sky above the true dragon dynasty, countless dazzling rays of light were like a gathering of stars. Vaguely, the rays of light formed a huge light dragon that soared in the sky and let out earth-shattering roars. When that roar died down, 9 more vigorous and powerful chants rang out in succession, resounding through the sky. The chants carried an astonishing might and a terrifying pressure that covered the sky and covered the earth. It swept past everyone, causing their bodies to tremble. Then, a group of huge figures appeared in the distance. Everyone squinted their eyes and saw 9 ferocious-looking flood dragons. Each flood dragon was more than 100 meters long. They were dark green all over, with barbs growing out of their heads. They looked extremely ferocious and tough. The aura emitted by each flood dragon was so strong that it made the swordsmen present shudder. It was as if they could sweep away and crush everything. Just one of the 9 flood dragons was enough to sweep away nearly 2,000 sword of Gojosian on the platform. Imperial beasts. These flood dragons are imperial beasts. The voice was trembling. I've heard that there are flood dragons in the true dragon dynasty. So it's true, and there are 9 of them. Judging by their power, ordinary Nirvana realm swordsmen are no match for them. Primordial ferocious beasts were also divided into different levels. King beasts were for sword of Gojosian, Emperor beasts were for Nirvana realm swordsmen, and Saint beasts were for sword saints. Flood dragons were of a higher level among primordial ferocious beasts. They had extraordinary bloodlines and strong combat abilities. They were like the top geniuses of the human race. Flood dragons could definitely sweep away most primordial ferocious beasts of the same level. Ordinary Nirvana realm swordsmen were no match for the 9 flood dragons at all. The appearance of the 9 flood dragons was shocking, but what was even more shocking was the chariot behind them. It was a huge and gorgeous chariot. There were 9 lifelike dragon carvings on the chariot, as if they were flying in the sky. The 4 wheels of the chariot were rolling in the void, burning with golden flames. It was like a chariot of the sun, streaking across the sky, leaving a golden trail. The person sitting in the chariot immediately became the center of the world, the focus of countless people's eyes. He wore a crown with 9 dragons on his head and a robe with 9 dragons on his body. His pale golden face was extremely majestic. When he opened and closed his eyes, sharp light pierced through the void. His aura was like that of a monarch. It's the emperor of the true dragon dynasty. Under the gaze of countless people, the 9 flood dragons pulled the chariot to the edge of the platform. Greetings, your majesty. Some swordsmen bowed 90 degrees to the emperor in the sky. The true dragon dynasty didn't have a rule about kneeling. When meeting the emperor, they only needed to bow 90 degrees to show respect. This bow was the bow of a subject to the emperor. Soon after, the other swordsmen all followed suit, including Chu Mu, because this bow was the bow of a younger generation to an elder, the bow of a weak person to a strong person. The true dragon emperor wasn't just the emperor of the true dragon dynasty. He himself was a powerful saint, even though he was only at the first heavenly layer of the Yonic era. Every sword saint was the main force of the human race. They were the protectors of the human race, not to mention a sword saint like the true dragon emperor, who had the bloodline of a true dragon. He was much stronger than ordinary sword saints of the same level. Everyone, please rise. A majestic voice resounded. The Rising Dragon pageant is held once every 100 years in the true dragon dynasty. The winners of the 3 groups can all enter the dragon Yuan pond to cultivate. Whether they're swordsmen of the true dragon dynasty or not, they're all part of the human race. I've always hoped that the human race would prosper and produce geniuses. I'm sure all the geniuses have been waiting for the pageant to begin for a long time. I won't say much. The true Dragon Emperor smiled faintly. I declare that the rising dragon pageant of the true dragon dynasty begins now. As soon as the true Dragon Emperor finished speaking, the platform in the middle suddenly changed. With a rumble, the three groups of Sword of Gojosian soared into the sky, looking at the changes below in surprise. The huge platform slowly sank. Lights of various colors flashed. The ground shook and rumbled. It was as if the world had changed. The three platforms slowly floated up from below, protruding out of the ground. The three platforms were of the same size and were arranged in a triangular formation. Each platform protruded 10 meters from the ground and covered an area of tens of thousands of square meters. Colorful lights shrouded the high platforms, forming an inverted semicircle that emitted a shocking aura fluctuation like a surging tide.